The pink-haired empress confidently declares she needs to get married. Her younger brother, Eddie, immediately starts pondering the requirements. He assumes her future husband needs to be the absolute strongest on the continent, but she quickly shuts that down. She points right at him, telling him to listen up. She explains she just needs someone who can quietly follow directions. Eddie gets totally hyped, promising to prepare everything for his busy sister while she nervously asks what exactly he's planning. A deeply ominous feeling washes over her. In her previous life, she didn't care about her little brother at all. Feeling neglected, he ended up leaving the house in the dead of night. Eddie was gone for 6 whole years, and she ultimately died of overwork at age 26. His absence became her absolute biggest regret, so when she regressed back to her 14-year-old self, she immediately hugged her brother tight. As a result, Eddie grew up bright, healthy, and fiercely loyal, becoming a total prodigy with the sword. But he also earned a wild reputation as a notorious madman. Back in the present, the Empress rubs her temples, severely regretting her life choices. Her bespectacled secretary casually mentions that a whopping 178 people have entered her husband-finding tournament. She immediately questions if the Dukes of Pagos are participating. She absolutely hates the idea of giving them power, considering they don't even recognize her authority. She asks her secretary for the exact rundown of the participants. He mentions Dulcin Pagos, a 23-year-old with unique leadership skills. Next up is Geppetto Delmoy, an incredibly gifted swordsman from the Imperial Academy. Annoyed, she interrupts, asking if literally anyone has basic political or economic skills instead. Her secretary nervously sweats, admitting it's mostly just meatheads with swords. She stares blankly, wondering why these brawlers even showed up to a royal marriage contest. The secretary drops a bomb. The winner has to face Eddie in a final duel. She loses her mind, realizing her brother is going to slaughter all her potential candidates. The secretary calmly predicts that Duke Durhard of the North will likely make it to the finals. Refusing to let Eddie absolutely wreck her only decent prospect, she makes a split-second decision. She stands up abruptly, leaving her secretary totally confused. With a terrifyingly sweet smile, she decides she's just going to have to break someone's leg. She cracks her knuckles, ready to throw down. Flashback to Eddie throwing a massive tantrum, begging her not to keep weaklings by her side. She looks completely exhausted by his dramatics. Laying down the law, she compromises. She'll use the winner as a public servant for a year before even thinking about marriage. Eddie happily agrees to this loophole, promising to beat up anyone who slacks off on the job. Back in reality, Cecil, the blonde commander of the Imperial Inspection Group, arrives at her office. The Empress warmly welcomes her and asks for an update. Cecil notes that the Empress is looking completely drained. The commander apologizes for adding to her endless workload. The Empress sighs, admitting she's just too stressed to let her little brother run wild unsupervised. She explains her failed attempts to assign an aide to watch over him. Cecil looks surprised, noting that the siblings are unusually close. Cecil then reports that Eddie secretly crossed the border last month. He apparently smuggled in a special elixir just to sneak it into the Empress's food. The Empress just laughs it off, totally used to her brother's unhinged hobbies. She reflects on how this extreme obsession started after their parents died early. When he was 16, he brought her a rare elixir, but she rejected it, so he resorted to sneaking it into her meals like a crazy person. Cecil points out that it's probably the only reason she hasn't collapsed from her insane workload yet. The commander promises to keep digging up dirt on the four dukes. The Empress stares blankly at the ceiling, realizing medicine won't fix her real problem. She dramatically flops over like a rag doll, groaning that if she doesn't find a husband to share her paperwork, she's literally going to die of overwork. The Empress sits regally on her throne, looking over the grand tournament grounds. The top-tier nobles from the Duke families are lined up as eager participants. But all eyes are glued to one specific man known as the Monster of the North. Enter Haven D. Hart, looking icy, intimidating, and incredibly handsome. He flashes a highly confident smirk. With a wave of her hand, the tournament to win the Empress's hand officially begins. Watching him, the Empress reminisces about the very first time she met Haven during a brutally cold winter. She was only 14 when she was forced to take over her entire household. With everyone turning their backs on her, she traveled to the freezing north as her absolute last hope. Even back then, Haven had the exact same stoic, blunt expression. But he didn't turn her away, gently reaching out to grab her freezing hand. Snapping back to reality, she wonders if he only helped her out of pure pity. Suddenly, Eddie leans in, cockily asking if she really thinks a flashy guy like Sir Delmoy will win. The Empress just smiles, knowing she spent years meticulously watching Eddie's intense sword training. She knows a good fighter when she sees one. Down in the arena, Sir Delmoy is declared the winner of his match. But Delmoy furiously protests, yelling that Eddie completely crashed his sacred duel. The Empress scoffs, sarcastically mocking his idea of a sacred fight. She lays down the law, stating that killing an opponent during her tournament will be treated as straight-up murder. When Delmoy whines about her changing the rules, she claps back, reminding him she's the Empress and can do whatever she wants. Completely over the drama, she orders Eddie to supervise the rest of the matches and walks out. Eddie immediately unleashes a terrifying dark aura, absolutely wrecking the complaining noble off-screen. Walking away, the Empress casually notes that she just took out the trash. Before long, the chaotic tournament finally reaches its grand finale. The Empress looks completely drained as Eddie runs up to check on her. He notes she barely touched her leftover soup, while she complains that it tasted totally weird. Eddie nervously sweats, knowing he definitely spiked it with his crazy stamina potions. Rubbing her temples, the Empress begs her brother to just listen for once. She reminds him she needs a competent worker to help with her royal duties, not mystery soup. Eddie just grins, promising Haven will win it all. She looks confused, asking how he could possibly know the results early. Eddie smirks, claiming Haven's going to win simply because he's the tallest guy in the north. The Empress turns her attention back to the massive arena. Haven stands victorious, looking like an absolute boss with his sword drawn. The Empress smiles gracefully, thrilled that her plan actually worked. Haven respectfully introduces himself to the roaring crowd. He drops to one knee, offering his grand victory to Her Majesty. She beams, graciously accepting his win and promising to share the glory of the Empire with him. Internally, she is jumping for joy, thinking she finally secured her ultimate paperwork buddy. But without warning, Haven gently takes her hand and kisses it romantically. She stares down at him, completely caught off guard by the smooth move. Trying to keep her cool, she awkwardly congratulates him again. Haven looks up with piercing eyes, stating he has one specific request. He slowly brings up her chaotic little brother, Eddie. A nerve pops in her forehead as she panics, praying her brother didn't do something unhinged again. Coughing nervously, she asks Haven if Eddie somehow offended him. Haven casually reveals that Eddie basically blackmailed him into joining the tournament by threatening to start a literal war. Since Haven's territory borders the enemy nation, an invasion would completely decimate his home. Mortified, the Empress quickly offers him an out, saying he can totally just go back home right now if he was forced. But Haven flashes a dark, cunning smirk. He points out that if he marries her, she'll be forced to protect his territory with the mighty Imperial army. Realizing she just got absolutely played, she nervously backs away and suggests she should pick a different candidate. Haven closes the distance, staring her down, and smoothly asks why she would ever do that. Haven lanes in impossibly close, smoothly whispering that he is already her man. Flustered but trying to keep her cool, the Empress steps back and declares there's still a final judgment to pass. Haven looks slightly caught off guard, asking if there was really a final test. She smoothly explains her loophole. She's putting him on a strict one-year grace period as her aide first. Mentally, she sweat drops, realizing she's just trying to delay the actual marriage registration for as long as possible. She places a hand on his chest, telling him to just focus purely on the work and not on her. Haven flashes a confident smile, promising he absolutely will not disappoint her. Instantly switching back into boss mode, she sits at her desk and tells him his shift starts tomorrow. Later, her chief secretary, Caleb, steps in to announce she has visitors waiting. The two runner-ups from the tournament, Dulcin and Delmay, are nervously kneeling on the red carpet. The Empress gracefully approaches them to handle the aftermath. Suddenly, we flash back to the celebration ball, where Haven smoothly offers his hand for a dance. He stares at her like she hung the stars, calling this dance his absolute honor. As they waltz, the Empress blushes, wondering if he's low-key calling her pretty. She casually tells him to report to her office tomorrow, but Haven sneakily asks if she'll come to his bedroom tonight. She immediately shuts that nonsense down. Back in the present, the Empress introduces Haven to Caleb, officially declaring him her fiancé. The air instantly turns freezing cold as the two men fiercely glare at each other, silent lightning flashing between them. The Empress sighs and orders Haven to stop threatening her secretary, which he reluctantly agrees to. Testing his actual skills, she hands him a complex policy document and asks for his verdict. Haven takes one glance and immediately declares he would reject it. When asked why, he starts spitting straight facts, pointing out an unpopular tax that desperately needs reducing. He exposes a fake relief plan, noting that hunger camps are already forming in the migration zones and demanding a full fraud investigation. Finally, he warns that developing the mountain mines will instantly trigger a massive territorial dispute. The Empress's eyes widen in absolute shock. This ridiculously handsome guy just nailed every single flaw she had secretly found. He's literally a paperwork genius. Thrilled, she immediately invites her new favorite worker to the sofa for tea. Sipping her cup, she casually asks what he thinks about moving their engagement up to next week. Haven looks totally confused, reminding her she just said she wasn't in a hurry. She smiles, admitting she changed her mind. Haven smoothly replies he'd marry her tomorrow if she wanted. Noting his good mood, she points out how happy he looks, which he instantly confirms. The Empress playfully remarks that it's great having a man finally take care of her. But then she mischievously drops a bomb, teasing that she might just add another guy to her royal harem after they marry. Haven absolutely loses it, jumping up and loudly refusing to share her love with anyone else. She tries to explain she just needs more workers, but he grabs her hands, intensely vowing to slaughter the Grand Dukes if they ever disrespect her. He promises to deploy the entire army to the borders just to keep her safe from the enemy nation. Looking deep into her eyes, he swears he will protect her at all costs. The Empress is completely stunned by his intense, borderline unhinged devotion. She gasps in awe at his ridiculous overreactions. Laughing, she asks if he's planning to conquer the entire continent just for her. Haven literally says yes, but she quickly orders him to stand down and stop fighting with her brother. She playfully threatens the harem idea again if he disobeys. Haven fiercely pulls her close, demanding she stay by his side until the day he dies. He vows to bet his entire life on her, totally submitting to her command. Later, the Empress happily sips her tea, realizing choosing Haven was the ultimate big brain move. She plots to rush the engagement just to lock him into a lifetime slave contract for her paperwork. Suddenly, she gags on her cake, realizing it tastes incredibly bitter. She sighs, knowing her crazy brother Eddie spiked her food with weird health tonics yet again. A maid interrupts her thoughts, announcing that the captain of the knights has arrived. The Empress looks up, recognizing Cecil's name, and tells the maid to let her in. Cecil rushes into the room with a deep bow, apologizing for the intrusion but warning that she has a highly urgent report. Cecil urgently reports a mass kidnapping in the Philander region. She explains the 7 victims are high-profile figures from all walks of life. The roster includes an academy professor, an earl's daughters, a famous architect, and even a 75-year-old historian. The Empress rubs her temples, asking if there's a specific reason security brought this straight to her. Cecil nods, revealing they got direct testimony from a witness of the 4th kidnapping. Flashback to a completely unhinged Eddie, swinging a rope at a bald guy and screaming that the Empress wants him. Cecil awkwardly admits the kidnapper literally dropped the Empress's name, making her instantly realize it's her crazy brother. Luckily, the victims are just locked in Eddie's mansion, so things can still be smoothed over if they're released immediately. But Cecil hesitates, coughing nervously before dropping the real issue. Rumors are spreading like wildfire that the Empress is secretly building a massive harem. She realizes Haven completely called it. Annoyed, she asks where her menace of a brother is right now. She marches straight to the palace stadium where Eddie is happily swinging his sword. Crossing her arms, she demands to know if he has anything to confess. Eddie looks genuinely innocent, asking if she's mad at him for some reason. She immediately calls him out for locking innocent nobles in his mansion, but he insists he merely suggested they work for the royal family. She slaps her forehead, having to explain that dragging people away against their will is literally the definition of kidnapping. Eddie smiles like a total psycho, explaining they all signed a life-or-death loyalty pledge, so it's totally fine. She yells at him to wake up and snap out of his delusion. Softening up, she gently pats his head, reminding him that crime is illegal and orders him to come apologize with her. Eddie stubbornly tries to justify his brutal interrogation tactics, but she firmly repeats her absolutely no kidnapping rule. She apologizes for scolding him, explaining she just wants to hire civil servants the normal, legal way to fix the system. But internally, her gears start turning. She wonders if any of Eddie's kidnapped nerds could actually help her with her mountain of paperwork. Later, she returns to her office and finds Haven waiting for her. He turns around, radiating an intensely dark, jealous aura. The Empress sweat drops, completely bewildered by his sudden mood swing. Meanwhile, outside the palace walls, the scandalous rumors are still spreading. Back inside, Haven sulks on the sofa, complaining about the wild rumors of her building a harem. He pouts like a kicked puppy, asking if he can really trust her. She desperately reassures him that he's the only one. Mollified, Haven smoothly states that for him, it is only Her Majesty. The Empress notices he's hiding something suspiciously behind his back. He just tilts his head, feigning total innocence. She stares deeply into his pretty, captivating eyes. The tension bubbles over and they share a deeply romantic kiss on the couch. Pulling away, Haven smoothly tries to play it off, claiming his lips were just chapped. Blushing slightly, he asks if he seemed too impatient. The Empress's mind races, mentally defining an engagement and noting that married couples actually sleep together. Haven shifts closer, playfully stating that as long as she promises not to take another lover, he'll gladly devote his entire lifetime to her. He leans in, teasing that he might be the only man she's allowed to kiss. She gives him a sultry look, asking if that's really a bad thing. Grabbing him by the collar, she pulls him back in for round two. Suddenly, a loud knock at the door completely ruins the vibe. Flustered, the Empress shoves Haven back and awkwardly yells for them to come in. The butler enters, bowing and apologizing for the interruption, while Haven covers his face in sheer frustration. As the butler speaks, Haven glares at the floor with absolute killer intent. Snapping entirely, Haven stands up, engulfed in a terrifying dark aura, and declares he's going to wipe his rival, Delmay, completely off the map. The Empress panics, asking if she didn't just tell him to stop hanging out with her crazy brother. Haven touches his chest, dangerously claiming it's his right as Lord Dehart to declare war. Realizing he's gone full Yandir, she gives him a fierce ultimatum. If he doesn't drop the violent battlefield mindset right now, then he will have to leave her side permanently. Pulling herself together, the Empress smoothly claims she's no longer cold. She tells Haven he can finally go rest, but he stubbornly insists on staying right by her side. Shifting to business, she brings up Sir Delma of the South. She reveals that the flashy noble actually had the audacity to propose to her. She wonders out loud if marrying him would actually benefit their faction. Staring sharply, she asks Haven what he thinks about bringing Delmay under her control. Haven scoffs, immediately calling Delmay out for being a jealous liar who just wants power. He points out that the South is fiercely envious of his own high standing as her fiancé. The Empress agrees, noting that the Pagos family in the East would absolutely lose their minds if the South married her. She drops some heavy lore. 10 years ago, the East literally saved the South from a massive invasion. Looking at a map of the Four Dukes, she explains the fragile balance of power at the borders. Back then, Delmay's forces were hopelessly crushed, forcing them to beg Pagos for backup. But as time passed, that gratitude completely faded into bitter resentment. Trying to regain his shattered ego, Delmay started straight up ignoring his Eastern saviors. Recently, things escalated when a high-quality mineral mine was discovered near the southern border. To Delmay's absolute fury, the development rights were handed straight to an Eastern family instead. The map highlights the highly contested Mount Delphin, a literal gold mine sitting right between the two territories. Naturally, both sides immediately called up their respective dukes for military backup. Historically, the East always had the upper hand since they saved the South a decade ago. But the Empress smirks, noting that the political game has completely flipped since she took the throne. She explains that the Central region now has the perfect excuse to step in and play peacemaker. By backing the disgruntled Southern nobles, she can tip the scales of justice in her favor. She plans to completely shatter the East's influence and snatch Delmay's loyalty for herself. Haven bows deeply, pledging to execute her ruthless master plan flawlessly. With the bait set, she smiles, patiently waiting for Delmay to take the deal. Suddenly, her vision violently blurs out of nowhere. Before she can even react, she collapses onto the red carpet like a cut string. Haven catches her, frantically asking what's wrong as she covers her mouth, intensely nauseous. Total chaos erupts in the palace as the staff desperately scrambles to find a doctor. Fading out, the Empress reflects on her lonely, miserable first life where she was known as an ice queen. Back then, even her own brother Eddie couldn't stand being around her. But in her second life, she chose to be open, securing a fiercely loyal brother and a brilliant fiancé. She even tolerated Eddie sneaking weird, suspicious tonics into her cakes, all just to survive longer. Meanwhile, in the real world, Eddie is absolutely bawling his eyes out by her bed, begging her to wake up. He clutches her hand, looking completely devastated that his big sister might actually die. Slowly, her fingers twitch and her eyes finally flutter open. Haven and Eddie immediately rush forward, asking if she's okay. Still groggy, she murmurs, confused by all their dramatic crying. She sits up and asks Haven exactly how long she's been knocked out. He solemnly reveals it's been an hour, prompting her to ask for the doctor's diagnosis. Haven looks completely serious, dropping a massive bombshell: she was poisoned. The Empress's eyes go wide with absolute shock. The royal doctor approaches, nervously asking her to describe her exact symptoms. She admits she feels super nauseous and still has a lingering chill. The doctor confirms her dropping body temperature points to the notorious Jerial's poison. Haven instantly demands the antidote, but the doctor drops the worst news: there isn't one. Eddie literally sees red, grabbing the poor doctor by the collar and aggressively shaking him like a ragdoll. But suddenly, Eddie stops mid-rage, a look of pure realization washing over his face. The Empress casually leans back against her pillows with a completely unbothered smirk. Thanks to Eddie's endless crazy health tonics, she confidently declares she's going to beat the lethal poison with sheer immunity. The doctor is completely baffled, explaining that Jerial's poison is extremely lethal and has absolutely no antidote. Haven looks on in shock as the doctor notes the Empress is somehow fighting off the poison completely on her own. The Empress smiles internally, thinking she just got incredibly lucky. But as Eddie confirms the poison usually kills a normal person in 3 hours. She breaks out in a cold sweat, suddenly realizing the truth. For the past 3 years, Eddie has been sneaking his sketchy, homemade elixirs into her meals. She stares blankly, realizing her brother's unhinged obsession with her health literally gave her superhuman poison immunity. The doctor excuses himself to go brew some supportive herbs for her recovery. Eddie sighs in relief but casually points out that her cake today tasted way too bitter. He realizes with absolute horror that someone slipped real poison into her dessert. The Empress lies back, her mind racing to figure out who could have bypassed their tight security. Being an absolute workaholic, she suddenly sits up and tells them to call her secretary for her next meeting. Haven immediately pushes her back down onto the mattress. He fiercely scolds her for trying to work after literally surviving an assassination attempt. She pouts, but Haven strictly orders her to stay put and only handle emergencies. Eddie completely agrees with his future brother-in-law, vowing to personally inspect all her food until he catches the culprit. He tells his sister to take a well-deserved break. But as he turns to leave, she calls out to him. She asks why he muttered the phrase, "I can't do this again," while she was unconscious. A flashback shows Eddie looking totally heartbroken when he thought she was dying. Panicking, Eddie completely dodges the question, yelling loudly that she must be hearing things before sprinting away. The Empress sighs, deciding to let it go for now. Haven gently strokes her hair, promising to help her make her grand dreams for the Empire come true. Later, she forces down a bowl of incredibly bitter medicine. Haven gently feeds her a sweet candy to wash it down, praising her for taking it so well. With a straight face, she immediately asks for her work reports. Haven hands over a document detailing the Brundle Embankment project. She reads that the river keeps overflowing due to the previous emperor's neglect, and the scribes want to downsize the repairs. She firmly shuts the folder, refusing to compromise on the project's scale. Haven backs her up completely, assuring her he's already devising a plan to supply the massive manpower needed. As they work together, the Empress reflects on her emotions, feeling both joy and fear at having someone to rely on. She looks at Haven softly, realizing how different this second chance at life is. Haven thinks about how he's always struggled to fully understand her grand visions. Sitting by her bed, he admits he feels incredibly lucky to be loved and trusted by her. The Empress thinks back to her miserable first life, where her brother grew up completely neglected. Back then, she was a cold, distant sister who only cared about her royal duties. But in this life, her choices changed everything. She saved her brother and secured the throne instead of just fighting for survival. Haven looks at her with pure devotion, grateful for the incredible leader she has become. She stares back, overwhelmed by his loyalty. Joking to lighten the mood, she says she's glad she won't have to fight her husband for the throne. Haven fiercely promises that will never happen. She flashes a warm smile, telling him she completely believes him. Mentally shifting gears, she strategizes about her assassin. The palace security is insanely strict under Eddie's watch. For a poison cake to reach her plate, the culprit has to be an absolute mastermind. But they made one fatal mistake, they failed. She coolly orders Cecil to hunt down the rat who orchestrated the hit. Suddenly, her chief secretary bursts into the room, bawling his eyes out over her poisoning. With ink literally smeared across his face, he frantically promises to work 10 times harder if she just stays alive. She sweat drops, telling him to chill before he dies of overwork. Later, Haven personally steps in to serve her dinner. She warns him not to eat her food, reminding him that he doesn't have her insane poison immunity and could actually die. Haven gently kisses her hand, staring at her with soft, loving eyes. He vows to personally inspect everything until she is fully recovered. He carefully sets the food down, fully devoted to serving his empress. Haven explains that the Jerial poison is incredibly lethal but almost never used for assassinations. Why? Because it's so disgustingly bitter that normal people spit it out immediately. The Empress innocently admits she just thought it was a special concept dessert. Haven stares at her like she's completely lost her mind. He strictly orders her to stop eating weird-tasting food. She sweat drops, explaining she's so used to Eddie slipping unhinged health drugs into her meals that she literally can't tell the difference anymore. They realize her brother's crazy tonics accidentally built up her poison tolerance. Sighing heavily, Haven declares he has no choice but to eat every single meal with her from now on to test her food. She playfully warns him that if they marry, he's doomed to eat 3 meals a day with a workaholic. Without missing a beat, Haven smoothly accepts the challenge, absolutely refusing to back down. Later that night, the poison's aftereffects kick in, and the Empress tosses in bed with a burning fever. Haven completely shifts into boss mode, declaring they need to focus on her recovery before hunting the culprit. He hands off the medicine and aggressively orders the staff to bring ice packs. After some time, she slowly flutters her eyes open to find both Haven and Eddie hovering over her. Eddie practically jumps on the bed, desperately asking if she's okay. She gives a weak smile, casually mentioning she's just a little hungry. Haven checks her temperature, looking incredibly relieved that her fever finally broke. Eddie tears up, admitting he was terrified, and she softly apologizes for worrying him. But the wholesome sibling moment doesn't last long. Haven's eyes instantly go dark, radiating pure killer intent as he plans his revenge. She nervously asks what he's plotting, but he just tells her not to try and stop him. She sweat drops, completely exhausted by these overly protective men. Eddie completely agrees with Haven, vowing to hunt down whoever touched her cake. The Empress reminds them Cecil is already investigating and begs them to stop scaring her staff. Eddie pivots, firmly stating she needs a 24/7 bodyguard, even while changing or showering. She looks horrified at the idea, but Haven completely agrees with her brother. Haven promises to personally bring in a top-tier sword master for her protection. Later, the Empress gets bored out of her mind sitting in bed. Realizing her chief secretary, Caleb, must be drowning in paperwork, she decides to go help him. She tries to sneak out, telling Haven she's just going to see Caleb for a second. Haven blocks her path, casually mentioning Caleb isn't at the palace today. She looks confused, asking if he's sick. Nope, flashback to Caleb sneaking away like a terrified rat. Because Eddie literally threatened to murder anyone who brought work to the Empress today. She nervously laughs, realizing her brother has completely hijacked her schedule. She tries giving Haven a royal order to fetch someone, but he hits her with the ultimate Uno reverse card. He smiles sweetly, warning that if she works, he'll immediately snitch to Eddie. She immediately surrenders. Haven's expression softens as he tells her that if the Empire falls just because she rests for one day, it was doomed anyway. He gracefully kneels before her. He praises her for single-handedly pulling the Seven Hills Empire out of the mud, understanding her deep attachment to it. But he firmly reminds her that she's an emperor, not a literal god. She can't carry the entire world on her shoulders. Since she still has a slight fever, he begs her to just rest for today. Realizing his words actually make perfect sense, she finally agrees to take a break. Haven suddenly lands in incredibly close, completely invading her personal space. But he playfully pulls back at the last second, teasing that they'll save the romance for next time. Instead, he hands her a massive document, the exact list of medicines Eddie has been feeding her. Reading the insane schedule of daily tablets and seasonal tonics, Haven jokes she's basically drinking the elixir of immortality. He specifically points out a rare medicine from the Cincy flower. The Empress stares at the list, deeply reflecting on her past life where she completely neglected her family. She silently vows to be a better sister this time around and never repeat her heartless mistakes. Suddenly, the doors fly open and Eddie bursts into the room, crying dramatically and screaming that he was wrong. The Empress stares at her brother, calmly asking exactly what he thinks he did wrong. Eddie sheepishly admits he locked down the palace so she could rest. He hasn't even realized she knows about the poison yet. Frantically guessing, he asks if she's mad that he chased Count Valford away. The Empress watches him sweat, realizing her brother is doing way too much shady stuff behind her back. She firmly orders him to sit down, and he instantly obeys like a scolded puppy. She reassures him she isn't mad, but she has a very serious question to ask. Eddie immediately brightens up, promising to answer absolutely anything. The Empress thinks deeply. Eddie's extreme paranoia about her health is incredibly strange. It almost feels like he explicitly knows she is destined to die of illness. But that makes no sense. In their past life, he ran away and never even saw her pass away. Unless he remembers everything too. Taking a massive leap of faith, she asks Eddie the ultimate question. She drops the bomb, bringing up reincarnation. She directly asks if he has any memories of his past life. To speed things up, she confesses that she remembers everything, from him running away to her own tragic death. Eddie completely panics, accidentally muttering that the time stone was only supposed to keep the caster's memories. The Empress catches his slip-up instantly, the time stone. Haven watches closely as Eddie nervously asks if she's absolutely sure about her memories. The Empress presses him, demanding to know what he's hiding. Her eyes go wide as she finally connects the dots. Eddie went back in time. Eddie confesses that Duke de Hart's family owned a legendary treasure that could reverse time. He brought it back to save her, but he was too late, she was already dead. At her funeral, he found the final letter she left behind. He reveals he remembers every single word, realizing she actually loved him. He cries, admitting he always thought she hated him. He tearfully explains that he felt completely useless while she worked herself to the bone. People were constantly trying to use him to undermine her authority. He deeply regrets that his mere existence caused her so much political trouble. Clenching his fists, he seethes with anger at the nobles who manipulated him. The Empress stares at him, realizing this was the real reason he left home. He ran away with 0 pennies just to secure her absolute claim to the household. The Empress absolutely loses it, calling him an idiot and yelling that she searched for him for years. Eddie panics as she bursts into tears, though she stubbornly denies crying. She sniffles, asking how he even survived without a single coin to his name. Eddie explains he fled to the north, getting close to Duke de Hart and discovering the Time Stone. He was preparing a plot with the Duke but rushed home to warn her, only to find her gone. The Empress pulls him into a tight hug, realizing her little brother has been carrying this massive burden all alone. She thinks about how Eddie deliberately orchestrated everything to support her in this life. He literally set the stage so she could safely take the throne. But she wonders why his plans always involve extreme treason and rebellion. She then asks the real question, if Haven had the Time Stone, does he also remember the past? Eddie shakes his head, stating that if Haven remembered, he would have instantly killed him. When asked why, Eddie cheekily laughs and admits he straight up stole the legendary stone from the Duke. The Empress internally screams, realizing her little brother is an absolute unhinged menace. Trying to regain her sanity, she asks if this is why he pushed Haven into her husband's selection tournament. Eddie insists Haven has 0 ambitions for power and is completely safe. The Empress argues that Haven is literally planning treason. Eddie denies it, explaining Haven just despised the previous, incompetent emperor. He casually mentions it was because of the incoming war. The Empress is stunned. War. Eddie drops a massive lore bomb. The enemy nations of Gripton and Zilton were planning a joint invasion. Haven only plotted treason because the previous emperor was too stupid to handle the crisis. Eddie casually warns her that by next year, the entire continent is going to plunge into an all-out bloodbath. Eddie casually drops a massive suggestion, why not just unify the entire continent? The Empress sits calmly beside him, flat out refusing the idea. But Eddie is totally hyped, declaring he'll do absolutely anything for her. She immediately shuts him down again. She appreciates his loyalty, but firmly states she has 0 interest in ruling the whole world. Eddie dramatically draws his sword, insisting that since war is inevitable, she has to win it all. Having absolutely none of it, the Empress furiously grabs his head, yelling that she won't do it. She warns him not to act recklessly. She explains she doesn't care about unification. She's just terrified because in exactly 4 years, Gripton will invade her empire. She lays out the grim reality. If Gripton forms an alliance with Zilton, the Northern Territory will turn into an absolute battlefield. Even though Haven and Eddie could slaughter the front lines, the capital would still fall if the internal dukes betrayed them. She refuses to leave her empire's fate to chance. Eddie sighs, genuinely worried about his sister stressing over this massive war. He confidently points out that she has both him and the Duke, so victory is basically guaranteed. The Empress rubs her temples, reminding her meathead brother that wars aren't just won with swords. They require insane amounts of management and resources. As commander-in-chief, she has to handle all the grueling paperwork that comes with expanding a territory. Eddie finally gets the picture and flashes a wicked smirk, deciding to hunt down the internal traitors first. She orders him to report back immediately if the Pagos family is behind the recent chaos. He happily agrees. Pausing at the door, Eddie turns back, sincerely apologizing for his past rebellious behavior. He softly thanks her for giving him a second chance and for raising him right. Flashing a bright smile, he promises to return safely and tells her to get some much-needed rest. Out in the hallway, Eddie crosses paths with Haven. Haven enters the royal bedroom, ready to check on his fiancée. The Empress blushes, happily sighing about how cute her little brother is. Haven agrees, but his expression is dead serious. Getting instantly jealous, he aggressively demands she take back the compliment. Changing the subject, Haven sincerely thanks her for giving him a new lease on life. He gently touches her shoulder, promising to treat her like absolute royalty. He tells her she can ask him for anything, regardless of the cost. Haven smirks, noting her suddenly sweet attitude and wondering what caused the change. She flashes a dazzling smile, teasingly admitting that she's only being nice because she likes him. Haven casually brings up her long chat with Eddie, noting that they don't need to stress about the impending war. The Empress's eyes widen, realizing Haven already knows about the secret Gripton and Zilton alliance. Haven looks incredibly confident, declaring he's been ready for this war for a long time. She sighs in relief at his reliability, but insists she needs to manage the internal noble families before looking outward. Haven's eyes spark with ambition, suggesting they just conquer the entire continent, literally matching Eddie's exact unhinged thought process. She hits him with a definitive no, but he playfully urges her to give world domination a try. She screams a massive no right in his face. Haven just chuckles, gently kissing her hand and smoothly confessing that he fell in love with her fierce determination. He promises not to force her into anything she doesn't want. With a loving gaze, he vows to stay by her side forever. A few days pass and the Empress finally makes a full recovery. Back on her feet, she returns to her absolute favorite place, the office. Caleb, her chief secretary, bursts into the room, literally bawling his eyes out with joy. She tells him to stop crying, noting that the poor guy looks like a walking zombie from doing all her paperwork. Instantly back to the grind, she orders Haven to gather intel on the enemy empires and Caleb to prioritize the Southeast documents. Caleb wipes his tears and hands her a highly urgent document straight from the palace. She looks down, realizing it's her official betrothal paperwork. She completely glares at the paper, absolutely annoyed that her engagement ceremony is scheduled for tomorrow when she's swamped with work. But knowing Haven would be heartbroken if she delayed it, she grabs her pen. She signs the document, deeply reflecting that balancing an empire and a marriage is going to be incredibly tough. Meanwhile, Haven just stares at her fondly, completely ignoring the massive workload because he's just happy to spend time with his Empress. The ruler considers Haven's bold request to spend more time together. Haven flashes a soft smile, gently holding a shimmering red jewel. Just like that, the two take a peaceful evening stroll through the palace gardens as the sun sets. They decide to take a quick breather to enjoy the view. But Haven immediately goes into protective fiancé mode, nagging her about sitting around too much. He admits he was super worried back when he didn't realize her physical strength was actually off the charts. The ruler just brushes it off with a cute pout, totally proud of her healthy lifestyle. Changing the subject, she mentions that her chaotic younger brother Eddie is supposed to return today. She rubs her temples, fully expecting him to stir up some kind of wild trouble the second he arrives. Haven tries to reassure her, claiming the young count isn't as bad as she thinks. He calmly nods, completely getting the picture. He fully understands why she treats her fiercely protective brother like a toddler playing near a cliff. Curious, the ruler flips the script and asks if Haven has any siblings of his own. He drops a casual lore bomb, revealing he's an only child and his uncle currently runs his northern territory. But when Haven casually mentions his uncle actually wanted him dead, the ruler freezes. She looks absolutely furious, demanding to know why his own family is beefing with him. She is completely ready to throw hands on his behalf. Haven sighs and explains the messy family drama. He reveals that the DeHart bloodline is strictly known for their jet black hair and black eyes. Because he rocks ash gray hair, his uncle and the northern nobles are convinced he's a total fake. They spread nasty rumors to isolate him, making his life miserable growing up. Haven claims he doesn't really care anymore, but the ruler is having none of it. She furiously declares that anyone insulting him or his late mother will be severely punished. But Haven stops her, dropping an absolute bombshell. He looks away and reveals that he actually is adopted. He softly admits this massive secret is now something only the two of them share. The ruler literally couldn't care less about his bloodline and still wants to stretch his uncle's lips over his head like a rubber band. Haven bursts into genuine laughter at her violent defense. He offers to just give up his duke title to his uncle once they marry to avoid the political awkwardness. The ruler stares at him, realizing just how much pressure he's been hiding all this time. She shuts his idea down immediately, stating that an adopted child is still a true heir. She knows his leadership and combat skills in the north are totally unmatched. She refuses to let him step down just because of some petty family haters. She doesn't care about his lineage, she only cares about the man standing in front of her. Looking him dead in the eye, she promises to protect him with the full power of the Empire. Touched by her fierce loyalty, Haven's gaze softens. He vows to become the ultimate sword to protect Her Majesty. With the romantic tension maxed out, she reaches out her hand and they head back inside. Fast forward to the official engagement ceremony, and shockingly, Eddie is still nowhere to be found. The royal couple steps out looking absolutely flawless in their matching white and gold ceremonial outfits. During the ceremony, the ruler officially elevates Haven, granting him a direct royal title to cement his power. Meanwhile, the DeHart family members in the crowd look like they just swallowed sour milk. The salty uncle didn't even bother to show up, but the ruler is entirely unbothered. Hand in hand, the Emperor of Seven Hills and the Monster of the North are officially engaged. The nobles gossip among themselves, mesmerized by the historic event. The newlyweds stride down the aisle, completely ignoring the haters in the room, catching a blue-haired official looking way too gloomy in the crowd. The ruler shoots him a telepathic glare that basically screams, "Smile right now or else," forcing him to instantly beam with joy. Later, back in her office, she changes into her work clothes and summons her trusted enforcer, Cecil. With the wedding drama handled, the ruler gets straight back to business, ready to interrogate Cecil about her ongoing investigations. Back in the office, the ruler asks Cecil about Haven's reputation among the northern nobles. Cecil confirms that the blue-haired noble from the wedding was falling in line, just as expected. They discuss the messy rumors surrounding Haven's childhood. His uncle, serving as the acting duke, tried his absolute hardest to ruin Haven's life. But on his coming-of-age day, Haven took his sword and gave his uncle a very aggressive shave, slicing his entire beard off. The ruler bursts into laughter, realizing Haven was definitely aiming for the neck but settled for the facial hair. With the engagement finalized, Haven is now the official reserve king of the empire, locking down his absolute authority. Meanwhile, Secretary Caleb reports that the vanguard is in position, and he successfully interviewed the scholars Eddie previously kidnapped. A top-tier architect happily takes on the Brundle Dyke project, crossing a massive headache off the ruler's to-do list. Suddenly, Eddie bursts into the room, grinning like he didn't just go MIA for 10 whole days. But he isn't alone. He brought a blonde, curly-haired girl with him, instantly making the ruler's aura turn dangerously dark. Realizing he messed up, Eddie completely panics, squishing his own cheeks like a stress ball while begging for forgiveness. The ruler sits back like a mob boss, flat out warning him that pulling stunts like this will get him unalived. She glares, demanding to know if he caused any other accidents while he was gone. Sweating bullets, Eddie swears he didn't, explaining the lady is a poison specialist he tracked down. He proudly presents her as the ruler's brand new escort knight. The ruler facepalms, her migraine returning. She explicitly told him not to kidnap people anymore. Eddie quickly defends himself, claiming she totally volunteered for the night shift. The ruler stares at the girl in disbelief, while Eddie aggressively nods to confirm his story. The girl steps forward, bowing gracefully as she introduces herself to Her Majesty. Right on cue, Cecil bursts through the doors, looking completely stressed and apologizing for the rude entrance. She drops an absolute bombshell. The successor to Duke Skyer has just been kidnapped and brought to the capital. Cecil reports that the second daughter, Janice Skyer, was last seen. The ruler freezes, getting a sickeningly familiar feeling as the dots connect. She slowly turns her head to look at her shiny new volunteer knight. The girl cheerfully smiles, officially confirming that she is, in fact, Janice Skyer. The ruler absolutely loses it, roaring Eddie's name while he slips out the door, waving finger hearts like a total troll. Sighing heavily, she rubs her temples and double-checks the girl's identity. She leans in, asking if Janice truly wants to be her royal escort. Janice places a hand over her heart, pledging absolute loyalty and protection to the crown. Deciding to roll with it, the ruler accepts her and immediately hands out her first task. Janice stands at attention, ready to prove herself. But internally, the ruler is stressing out. She knows her brother is chaotic, but he wouldn't straight up ignore her ban on kidnapping. It turns out this whole mess is actually a massive runaway case. The Skyer family rules the western territory of the empire. Janice was trained as the heir since childhood, completely outclassing her siblings in every way. But when her father heard she was traveling with Eddie, he rushed to the capital, totally misunderstanding the situation because of Eddie's infamous kidnapping streak. The ruler realizes Eddie is actually innocent this time. She figures if Janice is an adult and left home on her own 2 feet, it's her own decision. Just then, Haven strolls into the room, looking effortlessly sharp. The ruler welcomes him back and immediately points to the background, ordering him to break up a fight between Eddie and Janice. Haven steps between the two wildcats and drops a terrifying boss-level aura that instantly freezes them in place. Later, Eddie and the ruler regroup to discuss the poisoned cake investigation, with Eddie suspecting a personal grudge. The ruler reviews the facts. They interrogated everyone, chased out the suspects, and scoured the capital, but the culprit is still a ghost. She casually tells him to drop the investigation, assuming the assassin will just try again. Eddie absolutely loses his mind over her lack of survival instincts. But the ruler is completely chilling. With Haven inspecting her food and her brother hovering around, she feels untouchable. Haven walks over and the ruler greets him with a sweet handhold. Walking away with her 2 overpowered bodyguards right by her side, the ruler knows she has nothing to worry about. Later that evening, Janice joins them for a fancy royal dinner, thanking Her Majesty for the invite. The ruler watches her closely, knowing she needs to confirm Janice's true intentions before letting the Western heir stay in the capital for good. During dinner, the ruler casually mentions that the Duke of Skyer is currently en route to the palace to drag Janice back home. But Janice isn't having it. She confidently declares that she's a working adult now and refuses to return to the West. The ruler smiles, completely impressed by her maturity, and promises she has absolutely no intention of firing her. Janice politely thanks her, but the ruler leans in, asking the real reason she abandoned her noble house. Clenching her fist, Janice admits she had to leave so one of her siblings could take over as the Duke's successor instead. The ruler's eyes widen as she realizes Janice pulled the exact same self-sacrificing move Eddie did in his previous life. Over the next few days, Janice fully commits to her new job, aggressively stabbing her food and going into absolute bodyguard mode. The ruler just awkwardly smiles through their meals, completely ignoring the looming family drama heading their way. Janice fiercely vows to lay down her life for Her Majesty, demanding to stay by her side forever. The ruler is a bit taken aback by this fiery dedication, but figures this is the perfect counter for when Duke Skyer arrives. Plus, keeping the Western heir in the palace is a massive geopolitical win, effectively neutralizing the West's military power. She feels a tiny bit guilty for using Janice as a political pawn, but the safety of the empire comes first. Within days, Janice adapts to the palace like a pro, shadowing the ruler's every move with total dedication. 3 days later, the peace is shattered when Diatria Skyer finally arrives, looking like an absolute boss ready to start a war. The ruler receives her in the parlor, politely accepting a lavish coronation gift to keep up appearances. Recognizing that Diatria is not someone to mess with, the ruler respectfully asks her to sit and rest after her long journey. Diatria politely agrees, but immediately cuts the small talk, scanning the room and demanding to see her daughter. The ruler puts on her best poker face and flat out denies the request. Taking a calm sip of her tea, she smoothly lies, claiming Janice took a sick day. Diatria realizes instantly that she's being played like a fiddle. The ruler pivots, praising Janice's incredible talent and declaring her absolute intention to keep her as a royal knight. Diatria glares, seeing right through this soft hostage situation, and warns the ruler she better back off. But the ruler doesn't even blink. She coldly reminds the Duke that both her daughter's life and her own are currently in imperial hands. Diatria furiously asks if she's being threatened, flexing that she isn't afraid to bash heads with the royal family. Instead of getting mad, the ruler bursts into a bright smile, apologizing for her rudeness and admitting Diatria is way cooler than the rumors suggested. Realizing intimidation won't work, Diatria switches tactics, pleading as a desperate mother for her daughter's return. But the ruler shuts that down too, gently revealing that Janice genuinely has no desire to go back. Getting straight to business, the ruler asks what the Skyer family actually wants in exchange for cooperating. Dropping the act entirely, Diatria admits they don't trust each other and proposes a cold, hard political deal. The ruler mentally calculates her master plan. She already secured the East and South, but she needs the West neutralized before the upcoming foreign invasion. She officially requests that Skyer declares total non-intervention and stays out of the capital's messy politics. Diatria agrees without hesitation, promising the West will stand down completely. With the tension cleared, they share some tea, and Diatria asks if Janice really volunteered to sacrifice her life for the crown. The Duke admits her daughter is extremely wary and often misunderstood, worrying she might have offended Her Majesty. The ruler warmly reassures her that Janice is incredibly polite, sincere, and doing a phenomenal job. Later, the scene shifts as the ruler regroups with Haven and Eddie to discuss the recent assassination attempt. Eddie is still throwing a massive fit about the ruler halting the investigation. Haven crosses his arms, completely backing Eddie up and scolding her for treating her own life so lightly. The ruler smirks, telling them to look at the facts. First, Eddie had been secretly slipping stamina drugs into her food for years. Second, the lethal poison the assassin used was notoriously bitter, something she would have instantly tasted and spit out. Trying to dodge their nagging, she fakes a headache, but Haven instantly calls her bluff. He steps closer, revealing he already saw the insane list of intense medicines Eddie had been sending her. The ruler explains her theory. Since she accidentally built up a superhuman poison immunity, the chance of the assassin actually trying to kill her with that specific, obvious poison is zero. She deduces the poison was just a smokescreen, a distraction meant to cover up a much larger hidden plot. She sweats nervously, realizing she can't exactly tell them she knows all this because she literally died from exhaustion in her past life. Haven agrees that unknown variables are dangerous, but asks if she has any actual leads on the true culprit, which she awkwardly admits she doesn't. Eddie jumps back in, yelling that the real issue is his sister being completely oblivious to her own safety. He wildly gestures, pointing out that she emptied the Imperial Guard and is ignoring basic defense protocols. The ruler sighs, trying to explain she was focused on the big picture, but Eddie is entirely zeroed in on the assassination threat. Giving up on calming her chaotic brother down, she leaves her food safety entirely in Haven's hands, officially making the monster of the north her personal taste tester. When Eddie freaks out about Haven tasting the ruler's poisoned food, she casually admits she's been secretly feeding the Duke high doses of poison-resistance drugs. Eddie's face lights up, realizing Haven is going to be insanely overpowered. The ruler just sighs, wondering where she went wrong raising this chaotic kid. Cut to Haven, casually taking a massive, crunchy bite out of an apple, looking completely unbothered by the whole poison conversation. The ruler snaps back to reality, realizing Eddie is actually about to leave on his mission. Later, she sits at her desk, feeling totally drained and out of her usual rhythm. It's only been a day or two since her brother left the palace, but she feels completely empty inside. She stares blankly at her paperwork, realizing this is the first time she's ever sent him far away. Haven notices her spacing out and asks if she's worried about the young count getting hurt, totally baffled because Eddie is practically invincible. He chuckles, pointing out that Eddie is a walking disaster who would probably cause a major accident if he wasn't unleashed on an actual mission. Haven gently reassures her, saying Eddie is probably thrilled that his sister trusts him enough to give him a direct royal order. The ruler softens, admitting she's always trusted her little brother. But she clarifies that trusting him as family and officially entrusting him with a dangerous imperial mission feel totally different. Haven smiles, suggesting she just focus on finding a good way to praise him when he returns, since he'll definitely want a pat on the back. He flashes a warm, reassuring smile, telling her to stop stressing so much. Touched by his comfort, she reaches out and gently takes his hand. Looking up at him, she admits that getting engaged to him was the best decision she's ever made. Haven's heart literally skips a beat at her sweet words. Then she reaches up and gently pats his head like a good boy, catching him completely off guard. Haven instantly blushes, totally flustered by the sudden affection, and stammers out a confused question. Feeling refreshed, the ruler playfully ignores his panic and cheerfully suggests they go grab lunch. Just then, a knock interrupts them and Cecil struts into the office. Cecil drops a massive update. Hindle has officially declared war on the territory. The ruler smirks, noting her master plan is moving way faster than expected. Cecil confirms that Operation White Owl was super effective. Their operatives absolutely crushed it by making the enemy lose their minds. The ruler asks if Eddie got the memo, and Cecil confirms the count is already rushing to the front lines. Handing over a stack of documents, the ruler orders Cecil to keep a close eye on the Delmoy faction's reaction and report back. She notes that Haven has the north locked down and the west is staying out of it, so she isn't sweating those fronts. She confidently predicts smooth sailing until harvest season, but decides she needs to check on the Duke of Pagos in person instead of just reading reports. Cecil stands at attention as the ruler declares she's heading out too. Cecil panics a little, awkwardly asking where exactly the Emperor thinks she's going. Fast forward and the ruler is fully dressed for travel, looking absolutely flawless in a fancy bonnet. Haven looks at her, asking if she isn't tired. He expresses genuine concern, knowing her physical stamina is basically zero, and worries she's totally overexerting herself. She brushes it off, claiming desk work is more about mental grit than physical stamina, and casually flexes that she used to work 14-hour days. Haven bluntly replies that working like that is exactly how you die. The ruler awkwardly freezes, remembering that in her past life she literally did work herself to death. Haven gently holds her hand, stating that while a workaholic emperor is the pride of the empire, it's a total tragedy for her fiancé. She quickly denies being a workaholic, trying to play it cool. But Haven isn't buying it for a second. He strictly orders her to treat this trip like a vacation and to stay gone for at least 3 months. He hilariously points out that even when he was running the brutal Northern Territory, he never worked as hard as she does. He demands they take a 1-hour walk together every single day. The ruler just looks at him fondly, telling him she loves him and appreciates everything he does. Haven blushes furiously, begging her not to say such sweet things out of nowhere. The ruler playfully teases him, asking if he really doesn't like it when she spits facts. She stares deeply into his eyes, admitting she just wanted to express how much she appreciates being cared for. Haven completely short-circuits, grabbing her hands and desperately yelling that he really likes her too. She just smiles, listing off all his green flags. He's good at his job, handsome, has a great voice, is kind, quick-witted, and even has soft, fluffy hair. Haven is absolutely glowing red as she adds that she loves his clear eyes and how safe his giant, warm hands make her feel. Just as she's about to keep listing his amazing qualities, Haven covers his blushing face, totally unable to handle her intense riz. The scene transitions to the Grand Master plan. Eddie is fanning the flames of war in Hindle, giving the Imperial Army the perfect excuse to swoop in and protect the citizens. The ruler taps her finger, confirming everything is falling perfectly into place. As promised, she arrives at the military camp at Mount Delphin, flanked by her elite guards and Janice. But there's just one massive problem. She looks up at the sky and angrily screams, wondering where the heck Eddie disappeared to. The ruler grits her teeth, realizing her chaotic brother might be messing up her master plan. Suddenly, Haven steps forward, his sharp eyes catching movement in the distance. The ruler turns, wondering if her runaway brother finally decided to show up. But instead of Eddie, an unknown group approaches, and Haven instantly draws his sword, ready to slice them if they take another step. A fierce-looking woman leading the pack barks back, demanding to know who they are. The ruler observes them calmly, trying to figure out if they're mercenaries from the Orhai's faction. The woman glares, refusing to back down and aggressively repeating her question. Stepping up like an absolute boss, the ruler flexes her royal aura and asks how they dare question her identity. She recognizes the Hindle Knight's flag flying high behind them. She figures out exactly who this woman is, a close relative of the Viscount leading the turbulent territory. The ruler stares her down, totally unfazed by the hostile attitude. Then she casually drops her title, officially revealing herself as the Emperor of the Seven Hills. The entire squad instantly drops to their knees, sweating bullets as they realize they just yelled at the supreme ruler. The female commander stammers, completely mind-blown that the Emperor is personally visiting a war front. The ruler smoothly explains she had to step in after a simple mining dispute exploded into a massive eastern conflict. Still bowing, the commander reveals that the South took advantage of the chaos, forcing them to prep for an all-out war. When the ruler asks about the Eastern forces, the commander mentions their own commander-in-chief just took off to attack the Pagos Duchy. The ruler's eyes go wide. Eddie. Haven actually chuckles, impressed that Eddie chose the most violently efficient way to end the war. But the ruler is absolutely panicking. Haven shrugs, admitting he would have pulled the exact same reckless stunt if he knew Her Majesty was heading to a battlefield. The ruler loses it, completely baffled how her brother plans to conquer a territory with only 10,000 troops. She declares she's going after him immediately. The Hindle Knights look up, totally bewildered by this royal family's wild dynamics. Haven calmly reminds her that her own escort is tiny, suggesting they move undetected, but she immediately shoots the idea down. She pivots back to the Hindle commander, double-checking that the southern forces are fully mobilizing against the east. The commander confirms, adding that young Master Delmoy is leading the southern charge. The ruler's strategic gears start turning. The knight adds that her father is meeting with Delmoy and they'll both arrive at the camp tonight. Hearing this, the ruler orders Haven to prep their troops for an immediate departure. She then commands the female knight to report back to Viscount Hindle right away. Haven softly smiles, seeing right through her tough emperor act. He knows she's just desperately worried about her little brother. The ruler sighs, looking out the window as she admits she can't help being an anxious older sister. Haven comforts her, promising that Eddie is way too stubborn and overpowered to get taken out easily. The ruler shoots him a nasty glare, reminding him that her brother is still a human, not an immortal monster like him. They share some tension-relieving tea, with Haven gently urging her to just trust the young count's skills. Suddenly, a secretary bursts in announcing a messenger from the commander-in-chief. The ruler jumps up, hoping it's news from Eddie. She urgently orders the messenger to enter. Haven narrows his eyes, immediately asking for the status report on the count. The messenger drops a massive update. Eddie's forces absolutely crush the elite Eastern soldiers led by Dulcin Pagos. The ruler sighs in massive relief, while Haven gives a smug "I told you so" smile. The messenger adds that Dulcin is presumed dead, and Eddie is currently speedrunning a siege on the main Pagos castle. The ruler quickly asks how the rest of the eastern provinces are reacting to this wild invasion. The messenger confirms that after hearing Pagos got wrecked, the rest of the east is completely paralyzed with fear. Haven analyzes the board, noting that fighting the Imperial army is basically suicide for the local lords. The ruler flashes a dangerous smirk, finishing his thought, fighting back would be straight-up treason. It's a classic numbers game. If they win, it's a revolution, but if they lose their heads. She knows Duke Pagos is currently sweating bullets. His elite forces are gone, his son is defeated, and Eddie is absolutely not the type to show mercy. The fact that Dulcin Pagos got wiped out means he foolishly tried to clash directly with the unstoppable Imperial vanguard. Haven smiles smoothly, suggesting they just take a leisurely stroll down the bloody path Eddie just paved for them. But the ruler is still an anxious sister, insisting they rush to Eddie's location right now. Haven shuts that down, prioritizing her safety. He advises her to wait for the Southern Army and let young Master Delmoy handle the messy vanguard work. Right on cue, Geppetto Delmoy, the Southern Duke's representative, enters the room in a flashy suit, bowing gracefully to Her Majesty. He smoothly kisses the back of the ruler's hand in a classic noble greeting, while Haven stares daggers at him, looking completely ready to commit murder over the casual touch. Haven asks if they should finally get moving, looking completely unamused. The ruler notices his hands are tense. Meanwhile, the old Duke of Pagos is currently locked inside his besieged castle. Playing the part of a merciful emperor, the ruler decides to extend a helping hand first. She sends a threatening letter giving him 3 hours to surrender, completely seeing through his strategy to buy time for the Eastern Guard. But she has absolutely no intention of waiting around. She sets up a casual tea time right outside his gates, and sure enough, the old Duke marches out to confront her. He glares up at the throne, totally annoyed by her presence. He starts whining, acting like an innocent victim and complaining that she's going too far. The ruler isn't having it. She completely shuts him down, reminding him he started a war without her permission. She fiercely claps back, yelling that he threw her empire into chaos over a local territorial dispute. The old Duke desperately points fingers, arguing that the Delmoy faction did the exact same thing and should be punished equally. But the ruler smoothly counters, revealing that the Duke of Delmoy actually asked for imperial permission first. She knows it was just a technicality to protect the South. But legally, they played by the rules, leaving Pagos entirely in the wrong. Sweating, the old Duke tries to pull the founding family card, demanding special treatment. The ruler's eyes go ice cold. She warns him that he's speaking way too presumptuously for someone with a very fragile lifespan. Right on cue, Haven aggressively half-draws his sword, glaring down like a total menace. Eddie suddenly charges in, wildly screaming about wanting to unalive the Duke, but Janice expertly slaps a hand over his mouth and restrains him. Realizing he is completely surrounded by absolute monsters, the old Duke hits the deck, groveling for his life. The ruler watches him beg, feeling like he surrendered way too easily. Haven figures the old man is just plotting his next move and asks if they should permanently deal with him now. She says no, knowing his death would give the Eastern factions a reason to unite and rebel. It's much smarter to let him live as an embarrassing example that no one messes with the Emperor. By letting him scurry away with his tail between his legs, she ruins his reputation and can easily absorb his troops. Standing nearby is the charismatic Geppetto Delmoy, who completely understands the assignment. The ruler admits he's incredibly talented and will definitely be useful to the crown. Geppetto smoothly bows, turning on the Riz and jokingly offering himself up for marriage if she likes him. Haven immediately glares at him, absolutely vibrating with jealousy as Geppetto insists he's a loyal follower. The ruler brushes off the marriage proposal since she's already taken. But she enthusiastically clasps her hands, thrilled to secure a shiny new worker. She brilliantly decides to use Geppetto as a political hostage, permanently leashing the South while putting him to work in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. She blushes with happiness, realizing this stealth mission was an absolute geopolitical massive W. But when she turns to Haven, his complexion is terrifyingly dark. She asks what's wrong, sensing that something is seriously bothering him. Haven claims it's nothing. In the background, Eddie is throwing a massive tantrum while Janice totally ignores him. The ruler sighs, telling her chaotic brother to stop picking fights with her new escort. Changing the subject, she asks Eddie if the troop deployment is finished. He confirms he left 5,000 soldiers behind with a trusted commander. She smiles, praising the elite crew they brought together, including Haven and Janice. Eddie just blinks, reminding her that the military command structure is pretty tight right now. The ruler notices Haven staring off into space again, looking completely detached. She leans in, snapping him out of it and asking if he's even listening. She pivots back to the Eastern strategy, noting that the situation at Pagos Castle was incredibly rushed. With the Eastern nobles constantly whining and causing headaches, she plans to forcefully redeploy all their border guards to completely shatter their military power. To seal the deal, she brilliantly cuts taxes in the Pagos region to win over the commoners. And she appoints a ruthless new tax administrator who will literally execute anyone caught embezzling. Out of nowhere, Haven drops an absolute bombshell, declaring he has to return to the north. The ruler is totally shocked, asking if an emergency broke out. He smoothly lies, claiming nothing is wrong. Her eyes narrow into a lethal glare as she steps forward, strictly reminding him that she absolutely hates liars. Haven smirks, smooth-talking his way out of it by calling the issue just some cumbersome housework that she shouldn't worry about. But the ruler isn't buying it. She narrows her eyes, asking if something terrible happened up in his northern territory. He gently cups her face, softly assuring her that there's no good or bad news to report. She pushes back, pointing out he's been acting super strange lately and demanding to know why it's so hard for him to just spit it out. Haven looks away, internally cursing himself for hesitating over something that really isn't a massive deal. He solemnly promises that if she lets him handle this, he'll return to her side in the capital as quickly as possible. Realizing she's interrogating him like an employee rather than a fiancé, the ruler mentally facepalms and backs off. Haven flashes a breathtakingly warm smile. He vows to sweep back to her side like the wind. Later, Eddie drops some suspicious intel. He reveals someone from the north came looking for Haven back at Pago's castle, wondering if it's a serious emergency. The ruler stresses out. Since she never became emperor in her past life, she has zero clue how this timeline's events are going to unfold. Eddie tries to play it cool, telling her not to overthink it since Haven seemed totally fine. But the ruler is spiraling. She hates being kept in the dark and wishes he would just communicate with her. She starts aggressively pouting, paranoid that Haven used work as a cheap excuse to run away from her. She pictures him back in his freezing northern element, wondering if he has zero regrets about leaving the capital behind. Snap, she completely breaks her quill in half, fuming over her MIA fiancé. Eddie and Secretary Caleb watch in pure terror as she practically catches fire from stress. Despite her foul mood, the Empire is actually running flawlessly. Geppetto is absolutely killing it as the new foreign minister, settling into his role perfectly. On paper, everything is a massive success. But the ruler feels awful, gripping her ruined paperwork as anxiety eats away at her. Trembling like a leaf, Eddie cautiously asks if his sister wants to take a walk to cool off. She initially agrees, desperate for a change of scenery. But she quickly plops back down, looking completely drained, and says she'd rather be alone. She apologizes to a sweating Caleb and starts rewriting her destroyed documents from scratch. Later, she sits down for some much-needed tea with Cecil. Cecil asks why Her Majesty summoned her out for a private chat. The ruler stares into her cup, hesitating before asking the million-dollar question. She quietly asks if there's been absolutely any news from the north. It's been a whole month since Haven dipped and she's heard nothing. She defends Haven's charm, clearly missing her man. Suddenly, she realizes that her awkward thank you to his love confession might have sounded like a brutal rejection. She goes into full panic mode, realizing she fumbled the bag horribly. If Haven misunderstood her feelings, things are about to get insanely complicated. She desperately demands Cecil to explain what Haven might be thinking. Fast forward, and the ruler is riding in a carriage with Eddie, strictly telling him to keep his head inside the window. Eddie is hyped for a road trip, happily planning to tie Haven up and drag him back to the capital. He assumes the Duke cheated and is fully prepared to execute him on the spot. The ruler sighs, patiently explaining that they'd just break off the engagement and get alimony, shutting down her brother's murderous vibes. She rubs her temples, firmly stating that Haven absolutely did not cheat. Eddie busts out laughing, admitting he completely knows Haven is fiercely loyal. He teases her, saying anyone with eyes can see the Duke is hopelessly down bad for her. The ruler is baffled, wondering if her polite and fair fiancé acts like a total yandeer when she isn't looking. Looking out the window, she recalls a memory from a very long time ago. She realizes she actually met Haven in her past life, long before time was ever rewound. She remembers being 20 years old, crossing paths with him during a brutal northern winter. Eddie realizes that's why Haven instantly recognized them during the tournament. He playfully calls the Duke sneaky for hiding their past connection. The ruler drifts into the flashback, seeing the towering, icy fortress of the DeHart estate. She remembers freezing half to death until Haven approached her, offering a warm cup of tea and buying out her entire merchant stock without a second thought. The ruler remembers a past timeline when she first met Haven up in the freezing north. Snapping back to the present, she decides to forgive his sudden disappearance just this once, even though he broke his promise to return like the wind. She arrives in the Northern Territory, immediately shivering as the freezing air hits her face, even though it isn't quite winter yet. She rushes to the estate and finds Haven looking deathly pale in bed, apologizing for making her worry. She gently caresses his cheek, softly ordering him to wake up. She thinks about how they were literally just discussing breaking their engagement to avoid political drama, but now. She's just incredibly relieved she came to get him, softly telling him she's right here. But the emotional reunion hits a speed bump when she brings up the massive elephant in the room. The Princess of Gripton who proposed to him is currently chilling in his castle. Haven quickly defends himself, stating he already rejected the proposal and was planning to handle the political mess on his own. The ruler raises an eyebrow, double-checking that he actually rejected her. She gives a sharp smirk, reminding him that if he had accepted, she would have brought the entire imperial army to his doorstep. In the background, Eddie gets way too hyped at the idea of a war, practically vibrating with excitement while Janice holds him back. Haven flashes a completely unhinged, lovesick smile, declaring that if she commands it, he's ready to lead the vanguard right now. The ruler sweats nervously, realizing her fiancé is a literal battle-crazed monster when he gets excited. Haven admits that when she didn't write, he assumed she had betrayed him and accepted another political marriage back at the capital. His expression turns intensely serious as he declares that he would absolutely never let that happen. She just laughs it off, playfully warning him that breaking their engagement would literally start a war. Dropping the tough act, she looks at him softly and admits she just really wanted to see him. Haven is absolutely stunned by her confession, realizing she rushed all the way to the frozen north just for him. Suddenly, Eddie interrupts, complaining that Haven's troops were digging a massive hole in Mitras Mountain for some secret reason. Before they can investigate, a man walks into the room and formally greets Her Majesty. It's Trita D. Hart, Haven's uncle and the acting Lord of the North. The ruler politely greets him, and Trita admits he was just about to send her an urgent letter. He reveals he wanted to request her help to save Haven, but the Duke strictly ordered him to keep her completely out of it. The ruler's eyes narrow, sensing some serious hidden lore about to drop. Trita exposes Haven's secret. The Duke was literally prepared to go to war against Gripton just to turn down their marriage proposal. Haven desperately tries to shush his uncle. Now fully intrigued, the ruler demands they summon this mysterious princess of Gripton immediately. As they walk, she wonders why Haven's men were digging trenches at the mountain. They enter the drawing room, and a white-haired woman is sitting gracefully on the sofa. She formally introduces herself as Lenoa, the second princess of Gripton. The ruler hits her with a lethal smirk, asking if she's the one who audaciously proposed to her fiancé. She questions Lenoa's motives, asking if proposing to the Emperor's man was a calculated political play or if she actually caught feelings. Haven looks completely baffled in the background while Lenoa firmly denies having any romantic interest. Lenoa claims she was forced into it by her father and didn't even know Haven was engaged until she left her country. The ruler instantly spots the lie. If Lenoa knew the marriage was impossible upon arrival, why didn't she immediately pack up and leave? She pieces the puzzle together. Gripton and the North were already enemies, so a random marriage alliance is incredibly sus. If Gripton actually wanted peace, their prince would have approached the Emperor directly. Feeling the heat, Lenoa nervously asks if she can return home. The ruler completely shuts her down, ordering her to stay seated. The ruler asks Haven about the current border situation, and he admits the enemy forces have been strangely quiet. The ruler runs the geopolitical calculations. In her past life, Gripton allied with Zilton to invade Seven Hills because of massive national debt. But in this timeline, the ruler already paid off the debt, cementing a rock-solid alliance with Zilton. Without Zilton, Gripton invading Seven Hills alone is a complete suicide mission. So if Gripton's troops have vanished from the border, it means they're pulling a massive diversion tactic to turn their eyes away. She deduces their true target. They're ignoring the North to secretly invade Raeliana in the northeast. By securing Raeliana and potentially devouring the neighboring Tudrem kingdom, Gripton would become an unstoppable superpower. The ruler immediately decides to personally inspect the northeastern front. Lenoa, sweating bullets, politely asks to be excused from the room. The ruler takes a slow sip of tea, glaring over her cup as she asks what will happen if she refuses to let her leave. Lenoa panics, asking if the Emperor is finally allowing the marriage. The ruler instantly shuts that delusion down. Lenoa's face drops as she realizes the terrifying truth: she's being taken hostage. The ruler flashes a wickedly sweet smile, sugarcoating the threat by calling her a diplomatic guest, while she completely dismantles Gripton's master plan. Lenoa goes full dramatic, declaring she'd rather unalive herself than let anyone stand in the way of Gripton and her father's grand plan. She even implies she'll gladly take her companion down with her. The ruler instantly snaps, yelling Haven's name. Without hesitating a single second, Haven draws his massive sword, aiming the lethal blade straight at the princess. The ruler spares her life, but coldly orders Lenoa to get out of her country immediately. Shaken to her core, Lenoa bows respectfully and completely scurries away. Haven is totally ready to carry out his plan and bury the princess in Mount Mitras, but the ruler tells him to chill out, clarifying she never actually ordered an execution. She logically explains that even if the princess stepped out of line, a war with Gripton is coming anyway. She insists it's much smarter to get a read on Gripton's movements before they swallow up the neighboring territory of Eliane. Haven agrees, but notes that launching a blind preemptive strike is wildly different from simply defending themselves. The ruler visualizes the continent as a fragile house of cards, knowing the political balance is incredibly delicate. If they strike first and break the balance, everyone gets swept into the crucible of chaos. They need to figure out Gripton's true objective first. Suddenly, Eddie strolls in, asking if he should go catch the fleeing princess, but the ruler smoothly reveals she basically just used Lenoa as bait. Eddie hilariously remembers that Haven literally had his troops digging a fresh grave in the mountain for her just hours ago. He assumes his sister spared her but was acting out of blind, raging jealousy. Haven blushes intensely, secretly hoping she was actually jealous over him. The ruler pauses, thinking it over, and completely denies the jealousy claim. Instead, she fiercely declares that she just wants to entirely monopolize her man. Haven's heart basically explodes. He blushes so hard he looks like a tomato, incredibly touched by her bold claim. But she instantly ruins the romantic mood by adding that her fiancé is just super useful, making Eddie sweat drop in the background. Haven looks completely flustered, asking if she truly meant monopoly or if he's just a handy tool. She shamelessly confirms he's just a great worker, completely playing with his feelings. Covering his furiously blushing face, Haven stammers and tries to compose himself. With the romantic tension cleared, the ruler officially kicks off their serious war council. She asks Cecil to immediately contact Eliane and Tudram before Gripton can launch their invasion. Cecil admits it's tough since they only monitor basic trends and have zero official interactions with those regions. The ruler realizes they have to rely on border informants to track down the vanished enemy troops. She completely focuses, knowing they have to figure out where Gripton's army actually went. She reasons that Gripton has always desperately coveted the fertile, wealthy plains of Seven Hills. Because Haven's northern army has blocked them like a brick wall every single time, they must be looking for a backdoor route to attack. Haven's uncle, Trida, nods along, knowing Gripton's stubborn tactics better than anyone. Cecil promises to keep a close eye on Gripton and suggests warning their powerful ally Zilton just in case. Cecil volunteers to send a warning, realizing Gripton might actually try to target Zilton first. The ruler's eyes narrow, calculating that the odds of Gripton successfully taking on Zilton are incredibly low. She smirks, noting that while Seven Hills looked like a faltering mess 6 months ago under the previous emperor, things are completely different now. Their military might be slightly weak, but they are absolutely loaded with cash and supplies. They just need to hold the line and win a war of attrition. The ruler looks like an absolute boss, confident that their wealth has maintained the peace so far. Eddie jumps in, warning his sister not to judge Gripton with regular common sense. He coldly states that Gripton's leaders are war-crazed maniacs who treat people like disposable toys. Taking the threat seriously, the ruler orders Cecil to calculate their exact war funds and figure out how many munitions they can borrow from the noble families. Eddie smirks with absolute confidence, promising to have his troops locked, loaded, and ready to move at any second. Trida D. Hart respectfully agrees to tighten the northern border surveillance. But then, the uncle advises Her Majesty to evacuate back to the capital immediately. He warns that if a war breaks out, the north will be ground zero, turning into an absolute bloodbath. Haven looks incredibly stressed at the thought of her getting caught in the crossfire. He backs his uncle up, firmly telling her it's way too dangerous and she needs to leave. The ruler slams her hand down, totally rejecting the idea. She fiercely states that if the north is dangerous, she absolutely refuses to abandon Haven. Haven's aura absolutely explodes with intense determination. Looking at her, he vows he will definitely win. The ruler smirks, realizing her presence acts as a massive buff, skyrocketing her boys' fighting power just by staying near them. Fully confident in her overpowered squad, she declares they will monitor Gripton's forces right from the front lines, officially adjourning the hype meeting. Following the tense council meeting, Haven smiles and offers to show Raviel to her quarters. He leads her into a breathtakingly lavish bedroom fit for a queen. But his expression drops as he realizes he let himself get distracted from something important. Turning to Janice, he strictly orders the knight to give them some space and keep everyone out. With the room clear, Haven calls out to Raviel, looking a bit nervous. He apologizes for keeping her waiting and admits he has a lot more to say. Closing the distance, he finally clarifies that his past response to her confession was definitely not a rejection. Leaning in close, he vows that he has no intention of ever marrying anyone else. Raviel teases him slightly, asking if she's really that bad of an option. Haven gets completely flustered, his face turning bright red as he stammers out a denial. Smiling, Raviel assures him that she feels the exact same way. She confidently states that if they are truly on the same wavelength, he should already know what she's expecting right now. Staring deep into his eyes, she challenges him to make a move. She playfully calls him out for fidgeting after kissing her with so much enthusiasm before. That's all the invitation he needs, and he pulls her in for a passionate kiss. But suddenly, a loud cracking sound echoes through the room. Haven is gripping the wooden bedpost so hard it starts splintering. Completely oblivious, he gazes at her with total devotion, saying he's waited forever for this moment. Ravel smiles warmly, promising to never let go of his hand. He tightly grasps her fingers, swearing the exact same thing. But Ravel sweat drops and points out that he needs to let go of the literal pillar he's crushing. Haven completely short-circuits as he realizes he just wrecked the furniture like a total meathead. Embarrassed, he tries to rush her to another room, but Ravel is confused about why the bed matters. He nervously insists the broken pillar is a safety hazard, completely overreacting. Ravel flatly tells him it's fine as long as he doesn't touch it, but Haven stubbornly refuses to listen. The romantic tension is instantly shattered when Eddie bursts through the doors, screaming for his sister. Janice stands firm like a brick wall, calmly stating she is following the ruler's strict orders to block everyone. Eddie throws an absolute tantrum, wildly swinging at the air while Janice effortlessly dodges his tiny fists. Ravel lets out a heavy sigh at the chaotic duo. She orders her brother to get along with her night, but Eddie just whines that Janice started it. Giving in slightly, Ravel grants them both exclusive permission to see her anytime. She notes that kids usually bond by fighting, but these two are glaring at each other with literal sparks flying. Changing the subject, Eddie announces he's going out to fetch a rare drug he couldn't find before. Ravel's face goes pale as she realizes her brother is still planning to force-feed her more sketchy tonics. Hearing it's nearby, Ravel seizes the opportunity and orders Janice to go with him. Janice is completely appalled, arguing that a bodyguard shouldn't leave her post, but Ravel makes it an absolute command. With the third wheels forcefully evicted, Haven beams with absolute victory. Later on, the group gathers in the grand dining room for a massive feast. The staff serves up a traditional northern dish of steamed venison. During the meal, Ravel casually asks Trida how he's managing the duchy during Haven's long absence. Trida laughs nervously, assuring her that everything is running smoothly. But Ravel drops a tactical nuke, casually mentioning she heard Trida wanted to steal the Duke title for himself. The entire table freezes in dead silence at the heavy accusation. Sweating bullets, Trida frantically explains that some factions opposed Haven's succession. He quickly covers his tracks, claiming it was all a massive misunderstanding and he simply thought Haven didn't want the title. He elaborates, saying Haven used to be terrified of showing his face in public. The scene cuts to Haven, looking like an absolute apex predator bathed in moonlight. Trida claims that before the age of 16, his nephew was actually an incredibly cowardly and fragile child. Ravel glances over at her hulking monster of a fiancé and is utterly baffled by the word fragile. Haven just smiles innocently and claims his cowardly phase was a long time ago. He playfully nudges his uncle, forcing Trida to sweat buckets and loudly agree that Haven is the rightful duke. Ravel sighs as this highly questionable interrogation ends in total absurdity, wondering how anyone could call this giant a weak child. Later, walking outside in the snow, Ravel asks Haven how someone's personality could possibly change that drastically. Haven puts on his best puppy dog face and insists he's still timid and weak on the inside. He gently takes her hand. Kissing her glove, he smooth-talks her, saying he gets incredibly nervous whenever she's out of his sight. Ravel smiles fondly, promising to save him no matter what ridiculous nonsense he spouts. She admits there will probably be days when they annoy each other, but her loyalty won't waver. She notes that Haven sees her the exact same way her overprotective brother does. Ravel reflects on her past life, remembering how she sucked at relationships and buried herself in paperwork instead of opening her heart. Dying alone of pure exhaustion was a brutal wake-up call. That's exactly why she decided to rewind time, to do things differently and save the people who genuinely care about her. She thinks about Eddie's unconditional loyalty and Haven's devoted, shy smile. But out of nowhere, her insecurities bubble up again, and she wonders why a guy who could easily demand half the royal treasury is so obsessed with her. She blurts out the question, genuinely asking Haven why he likes her so much. Haven doesn't miss a beat, softly confessing it was love at first sight. Ravel is utterly baffled, remembering how she looked like a literal sleep-deprived zombie back then. Changing the subject back to Trida, she asks how his uncle's attitude suddenly shifted from disdain to being so caring. Haven calmly explains that he simply used the easiest method to prove his power to the family, the Gripton Empire. He smugly adds that he just quietly crossed their border and came back. Ravel is completely mind-blown, realizing that Haven invaded an enemy camp totally solo at just 16 years old. She realizes she is surrounded by absolute lunatics and desperately needs a leash for both her brother and her fiancé. Meanwhile, cutting to Eddie and Janice, Eddie rubs his ear, wondering if his sister is talking about him, while Janice barks at him to hurry up and find the medicine. Eddie spots exactly what he's looking for. He points out a bubbling, intensely poisonous swamp, casually warning Janice to be careful. Janice looks mortified, realizing this literal toxic sludge is supposed to be the ruler's medicine. Before she can even process it, they both lunge forward into action. Now Janice Skyer is usually a pretty lazy knight. So to explain why she's going completely try-hard mode for a guy she can't stand, we have to rewind a bit. A flashback shows a young Janice dodging her duties, thrilled to slack off all day. She happily abandoned all her territory management and swordsmanship training to live a stress-free life. In town, Eddie had casually approached her, offering a cushy personal night gig with great pay and free food. When Janice asked who his sister was, Eddie proudly announced she was the Empress. Janice scanned Eddie like a freaking Terminator, analyzing his pink hair and green eyes to confirm his royal identity. Knowing the ruler was surrounded by absolute psychopaths, Janice made a firm resolve to get stronger to keep up. Back in the present, they are hunting a massive, four-legged venomous lizard. Janice swings her sword with laser focus, repeating her mantra about securing the medicine while Eddie yells not to damage its guts. The duo totally styles on the monster, taking it down with flawless teamwork. Later, Eddie and a heavily battered Janice present two steaming bowls of the nasty brew to Raviel with big, proud smiles. Raviel is deeply confused as to why there are two bowls, and Eddie happily points out the second one is for his new brother-in-law. Haven instantly panics and politely declines, but Eddie aggressively shoves it in his face, claiming it's great for stamina. Raviel watches her towering fiancé get bullied by her little brother and sighs at the sheer chaos of her life. Suddenly, Cecil bursts into the room with urgent news. The Grypton Empire hasn't attacked Seven Hills, they just blitzed Zilton. The intel confirms that Princess Lenoa was just a massive decoy, and after absorbing wealthy Zilton, Grypton's next target is definitely them. Realizing the entire geopolitical board just flipped, Raviel declares they need to return to the capital immediately to rally the nobles. Haven looks deeply concerned as Cecil explains that Grypton now has way more territory and manpower than Seven Hills. Sensing Haven's stress, Raviel asks if he has a headache, but he quickly brushes it off. Eddie furiously slams his hands on the desk, offering to march out and seize Grypton right now, while Janice firmly backs him up as his vanguard. Raviel smiles softly at her two attack dogs, telling them to calm down and give her some time to formulate a master plan. Eddie promises to follow her every command, begging her not to overwork herself, while Raviel gently vows to survive and protect her precious family. The wholesome moment is violently interrupted when Cecil bursts through the doors, screaming that the psychotic Emperor of Grypton just sent a marriage proposal. The room instantly goes pitch black as Raviel, Eddie, and Haven all start laughing like absolute supervillains. Sweating bullets, Cecil begs them to calm down, warning that acting recklessly will ruin everything. He hands over the official proposal letter sent directly by the enemy emperor. Raviel reads over the parchment, her face completely unbothered. The letter has the audacity to demand the entire Seven Hills Empire as a dowry in exchange for not being invaded. Without a second thought, Raviel casually rips the paper in half, taking it as a direct declaration of war. Suddenly, Haven calls out her name, making her flinch. He is radiating a massive, terrifying dark aura, drawing his sword as he casually announces he's going to go chop off the Grypton Emperor's head tonight. Eddie instantly summons his own killer aura, arguing with Haven over who gets to assassinate the guy, while Cecil desperately begs Janice to stop them. Instead of helping, Janice draws her own blade and goes absolutely feral, slicing the torn letter into confetti. Cecil looks like he's about to faint as he stares at the three glowing-eyed psychopaths, groaning that he has a massive headache. Haven aggressively snaps back, asking why he's stressing over something so worthless. Dropping the murder mode, Haven gently takes Raviel's hands, promising he would never accept a marriage like that. Eddie watches Haven and finally understands why their father wanted him on the throne so badly. He admits he thought the Earl just wanted to spoil Haven, but now he sees the grand vision. Eddie jokes that if Haven just becomes a full-blown tyrant, people might stop calling the rest of them crazy. Raviel sweat drops at the bizarre conversation, realizing she's the only thing keeping these attack dogs on a leash. The guys suddenly freeze and ask if she's actually considering accepting the insane proposal. Raviel sighs, explaining she's just trying to figure out Grypton's real motive, since he obviously doesn't want to marry her. Eddie jokes the old man just has a death wish, but Haven tells him to focus up. Haven smartly deduces that Gripton is either testing their reaction or stalling, because his army is exhausted from blitzing Zilton. Ravel agrees. Taking over a massive commercial nation isn't easy, and this delay gives her the perfect window to rally her nobles. Since Zilton fell due to inside spies, she immediately ordered a massive investigation into the noble registry to prevent the same fate. Haven reassures her that Gripton basically just gave them prep time, and they don't need to panic since Seven Hills citizens won't betray them. Ravel raises an eyebrow, asking why he's so confident about that. Haven turns on the charm, stating it's because they have such an incredible emperor. When Ravel demands a real reason, Haven points out that under her rule, the entire nation has transformed in just half a year. Ravel smiles, seeing right through the flattery but appreciating the rock-solid support. The scene cuts to the emergency noble meeting, where a noblewoman is screaming at the top of her lungs to reject the idiot emperor. A mustached lord throws a massive fit, furious that Gripton is looking down on them. The entire hall erupts into literal flames of rage, with every noble screaming for Gripton's head. Ravel stands at the podium, genuinely shocked by the absolute chaos. She expected Haven's northern faction to back her, but seeing the neutral west and pacifist south ready to throw hands is wild. Testing the waters, she calmly asks them to consider the proposal, pointing out it guarantees their safety. An older southern noble steps up, arguing that Gripton can't be trusted and will likely attack anyway. He firmly states that war is completely unavoidable. Another noblewoman shouts that they refuse to serve any emperor other than Ravel. The words hit Ravel right in the chest. She remembers how these exact same people completely despised her when she first took the throne. But the noble continues, praising how much the empire has thrived under her genius leadership. The entire room roars in agreement, vowing they will never abandon her. Haven's words echo in her mind, her people truly believe in her. She is left totally speechless by their unwavering loyalty. Getting back to business, she calls on Count de Lachenoir, the new delegate for the Eastern Territory. The Count steps forward, admitting the East is currently in massive political chaos and desperately needs stability. Ravel recalls recently crushing the former Eastern leader, Duke Pagos, and stripping his military might. She notes that Pagos boycotted today's meeting, likely hoping to start an internal rebellion. But stepping out of line, the new delegate bows deeply, declaring the East will stand united with the rest of the empire for the upcoming war. The narrator explains that Seven Hills was founded by 7 allied clans, though that unity has been fading for years. Ravel reflects on how rare it is for the squabbling nobles and the emperor to actually team up. She realizes that politically destroying Duke Pagos finally earned her genuine recognition as their true leader. She gracefully thanks the new Eastern delegate, realizing she might actually unite the entire fractured empire. She wonders if she totally underestimated the nobles' underlying patriotism. The room feels much warmer than she expected, mostly because the nobles are literally burning with a bloodthirsty rage to fight Gripton. Eddie beams proudly, casually reminding his sister that everyone absolutely loves her. Haven confidently agrees, stating that as long as she sits on the throne, Gripton doesn't stand a chance. Ravel sweat drops at her 2 overly enthusiastic cheerleaders, deciding to just roll with their intense energy. Later on, Janice checks in to ask if the chaotic meeting is finally over, and Ravel confirms. She notes that the nobles unanimously chose a bloody war over submitting to the marriage union, which was basically inevitable. Meanwhile, Ravel points out that Cecil looks unusually cheerful, likely because his team's productivity has skyrocketed lately. She sternly orders her exhausted new chief secretary to hand over the budget and go home, but the absolute workaholic refuses to clock out. Ravel flatly tells him to get lost and not come back until the massive dark circles under his eyes are completely gone. Looking at her crazy, dedicated staff, Ravel happily realizes she won't be dying of overwork all by herself in this life. But as she reviews the massive war budget left behind, she braces herself for a headache, breaking their prep into 4 main phases. Step 1 is securing the nobles' support, though she worries the common citizens might resent a massive war tax. She then orders Cecil to double the surveillance on Count Pagos's estate to crush any rebellious plotting before it even starts. Moving to the final phase, diplomacy, she reveals she's already sent out letters proposing alliances with neighboring kingdoms. Every nation agrees that the Gripton Empire is a continental threat, and they are all banking on Seven Hills to stop them. In fact, the Riverton Empire to the west is so spooked by the invasion that they've already dispatched a personal delegation to secure an alliance. Ravel's jaw drops when she hears exactly who is leading this convoy. Cecil confirms that the literal Prince of Riverton is arriving in person. He adds that the royal envoy is making record time and will reach the capital by next week. Realizing how desperate Riverdon must be, Ravel asks what kind of guy this prince actually is. Cecil explains that he's the crown prince's trusted brother, highly popular, and uniquely has a great relationship with the future ruler. He pauses and jokes that functional royal siblings aren't actually that rare around here. He points out that Ravel and Eddie also share an extremely tight, wholesome bond. Eddie just winks, admitting they are definitely the exception, especially since he has zero desire to steal his sister's throne. Digging deeper, Cecil reveals the Riverdon prince is 27, single, wildly knowledgeable despite being a playboy, and a total combat fanatic who hunts down master swordsmen. Ravel plans to roll out the red carpet, aiming to secure a lucrative trade deal on top of the military alliance. A narrator's note teases that this foreign prince is about to bring a massive storm. 2 days later, the nobles' conference reconvenes to discuss war funds. Duke Delmoy flexes by pledging 2 million gold, followed by Duchess Skyer casually dropping 3 million. The bidding war goes completely off the rails as the dukes start throwing millions of gold at the ruler, treating the war funds like a massive flex-off. Delmoy furiously tries to throw even more cash into the pot, but Ravel calmly cuts him off, stating they have enough. Delmoy looks genuinely heartbroken that she won't let him empty his entire treasury for the war effort. Duchess Skyer steps up next, complaining that Ravel is asking for way too few troops, even though she already requested 70% of the West's knights. Ravel shuts down the overachievers, explaining they need to strictly hold back resources in case this turns into a long war of attrition. She passes the floor to the commander-in-chief, her brother Eddie, who outlines the defensive strategy to support the rear while the North holds the line. But Eddie totally ignores defense, excitedly declaring their real plan is to launch a vicious preemptive strike before Gripton even breathes. Instead of being shocked, the entire Hall of Nobles erupts into roaring cheers, absolutely hyped for a bloody offensive. Haven adds fuel to the fire, casually announcing that his northern vanguard is already infiltrating Gripton, throwing the nobles into a frenzy to join the front line. Ravel stands frozen, looking like her soul just left her body as she realizes her fiancé and brother went completely rogue and started the war without telling her. The hall looks like it's literally on fire as the bloodthirsty nobles chant for total victory. Ravel visibly sways, completely shell-shocked by the sheer unhinged insanity of her own empire. After the chaotic meeting finally ends, Duchess Skyer politely asks Ravel for a private word. In a quiet room with Janice formally excused, Ravel sits down with the powerful leader of the West. The Duchess hesitates before bluntly asking if Ravel did something weird to her daughter. Ravel is utterly confused, prompting the Duchess to ask if she bribed or brainwashed Janice. The Duchess clarifies that Janice has been notoriously rebellious her whole life, so she's completely baffled as to how Ravel secured her fierce loyalty in just a few months. Ravel sips her tea, her eyes narrowing thoughtfully as she processes the phrase utterly loyal. Ravel explains that her relationship with Janice is strictly business, noting that when there's no danger, her knight just lounges on the sofa staring at the sky. She takes a sip of her tea, pausing to actually think about it. She realizes that Janice has actually been super active lately, and their bond has grown way stronger than a simple contract. Ravel humbly tells Duchess Skyer she didn't do anything special to win her over, guessing Janice just naturally grew fond of her. But the Duchess drops an absolute nuke, revealing that Janice came to her room last night and straight up threatened her. Janice had warned her mother that if she didn't confess to her secret illegal trafficking with Zilton, Janice would rat her out to the Empress herself. Ravel is completely utterly stunned by the plot twist. Duchess Skyer formally confesses to her underground smuggling operations with the neighboring nation. Realizing her own royal inspectors totally missed this, Ravel demands to know why the Duchess is exposing herself now. The Duchess explains she wants to leverage the Zilton nobles she used to trade with, knowing they secretly despise the Gripton Empire's takeover. Ravel points out there's no guarantee those nobles will side with Seven Hills, but the Duchess insists they are hardcore businessmen who can be bought. Knowing a politician never gives up leverage for free, Ravel asks for her terms. Surprisingly, Duchess Skyer only asks for a royal pardon for her past smuggling crimes. Ravel is genuinely shocked it's that simple, while the Duchess just smiles warmly. Ravel agrees to overlook the past, but strictly forbids any future shady transactions. The Duchess shrugs and accepts the massive financial hit. Ravel is internally mind-blown. The Duchess is willing to eat a massive loss without even demanding exclusive trading rights in return. The Duchess just chuckles, waving it off like it's pocket change. She admits that as a mother, she is perfectly fine risking it all just to grant her daughter's wish for Ravel's victory and happiness. The scene shifts back to the grand staircase. Ravel promises to clear the secret Zilton meetings with her inspectors so the Duchess can work her magic. Duchess Skyer places a hand over her heart, swearing her utmost loyalty to the ruler. Later, Ravel meets up with Janice, thanking her knight for scoring them a massive, unexpected win. She explains that triggering an internal rebellion with Zilton's nobles will wildly boost their chances against Gripton, and asks Janice what she wants as a reward. With literal sparkles in her eyes, the fiercely loyal knight insists she wants absolutely nothing. Ravel smiles fondly, deciding she'll just have to pick out the perfect gift for her bodyguard herself. Suddenly, a squad of maids swarms the room, hyped out of their minds because it's time for Ravel's evening date with Duke Haven. They practically vibrate with excitement, pulling out premium Riverdin satin ribbons and flashy jewels to dress her up. Ravel casually tells them to keep it simple since she's just going to take it all off after the stroll anyway. The maids look utterly horrified at her lack of romance. Ravel brushes it off, knowing Haven will simp for her even if she wears a potato sack. The maids squeal, noting that Duke D. Hart's eyes literally drip with honey whenever he looks at her. They add that it's crazy since his grace usually brings a terrifying, cold northern aura wherever he goes. Ravel is confused and asks if Haven acts cold to the staff. The maids panic and frantically backtrack, assuring her he is always perfectly well-mannered. But Ravel knows they aren't just making empty comments. She reflects on how she completely purged and replaced the entire royal staff when she took the throne to ensure a safe environment. She gently brushes a maid's hair, acknowledging how hard they all work for her. Ravel fiercely promises that if anyone ever mistreats them, they should come straight to her so she can wreck the offender. The maids are visibly touched. A quick flashback shows the old chamberlain complaining that Ravel is way too soft for sending the royal doctor to treat a mere servant's sick grandson. Ravel sighs, realizing her own people are so used to being treated like dirt that they don't even recognize their own worth. She calls Janice over to head out. The scene briefly flashes to a memory of Eddie deadpan calling his sister out for being just as completely extra as he is, which she totally denies. Cutting to the evening stroll, Haven gently teases Ravel for completely dropping her guard around him all day long. Ravel just smiles, watching her giant fiancé get bolder by the second. She playfully realizes he's been stuck on high alert bodyguard duty because she was so relaxed, promising to be more careful next time. Haven instantly looks gloomy, taking the blame entirely on himself. Ravel just laughs at his dramatic shift. Blushing furiously, Haven pulls her into a warm back hug, whispering how grateful he is. Ravel leans into his touch, knowing exactly what's on his mind. She realizes he just loves having the excuse to cherish and protect her, and it makes her feel incredibly loved. They share a beautifully intimate moment as the sun sets over the estate. Haven softly asks what she's thinking about. Ravel boldly declares she's thinking about how she absolutely must marry him, ordering him to never change his mind. Haven blushes hard, promising he won't, and offers to turn a small token she's holding into a necklace so she doesn't lose it. But the fluffy romance is instantly shattered as the scene hard cuts to Eddie violently slamming his hands on a desk, yelling at his sister for being mean. Suddenly, Eddie bursts into the room with tears streaming down his face, completely interrupting the sweet moment. He points accusingly at Janice and Haven, throwing a massive tantrum because Ravel gave her knight a ribbon and her fiancé a necklace. He whines like a giant baby, demanding to know where his present is. Ravel just smiles softly, reminding him that everything she owns is already his. She tells him he can take whatever he wants anytime. Eddie's eyes light up as he dramatically praises his amazing sister. But then he instantly takes her literal earring right off her ear. And to top it off, he straight up yoinks the imperial crown. He happily flaunts his stolen loot to Janice, while Ravel is left completely speechless by her kleptomaniac brother. The chaos is interrupted by a knock, and Cecil steps in to deliver an urgent report. He announces that the Riverdin envoy is arriving this afternoon, and he finally figured out why their prince is leading the group. Dropping a massive bombshell, Cecil reveals that Riverdin is officially proposing a marriage alliance with the ruler. Ravel severely facepalms, groaning that she is getting way too many marriage proposals lately. She knows an alliance with Riverdin is a solid political move. But she already has an absolute top-tier, insanely handsome fiancé. She nervously glances over at Haven, fully expecting him to be destroying the room. Surprisingly, he looks completely calm and collected. He politely agrees with Cecil's report, smiling innocently. But Ravel realizes she is dead wrong. Haven's eyes have completely lost their sanity, and he is gripping his pen so hard his knuckles are turning white. She instantly jumps up, screaming at him to drop whatever murderous thoughts are cooking in his head. Haven flashes a deeply unsettling smile, totally lying through his teeth as he promises not to kill anyone. Ravel immediately pivots and points at Eddie and Janice, banning them from committing murder too. Eddie playfully shrugs, claiming homicide wasn't even on his mind. But he immediately offers to assassinate the prince if Ravel gives the word. She frantically yells at her bloodthirsty attack dogs to stand down. Haven leans in and asks if she is actually considering Riverdon's proposal. Ravel flatly refuses, declaring she has zero interest in unemployed royalty when she already has the best fiancé in the world. Instantly appeased, Haven smirks and agrees they should at least hear Riverdon out. With the prince arriving soon, Ravel gets ready for the ultimate diplomatic showdown. Later, the royal meeting begins, with Ravel making polite small talk about the weather. Prince Varamir of Riverdon steps up, greeting her with the energy of a golden retriever. He flashes a blinding smile, cheerfully announcing that his father told him not to come back home. Ravel assumes the emperor was just worried about his son. But Varamir bursts out laughing, revealing his dad actually threatened to entirely disown him if he failed to secure the marriage. He laughs like a complete maniac about potentially losing his royal status. Ravel can't help but chuckle, finding the guy's chaotic, upbeat vibe impossible to hate. Haven keeps his cool, politely telling the prince to take his time. Blushing slightly, Varamir shyly admits he has one huge favor to ask. He suddenly points directly at Haven and Eddie, begging for the absolute honor of fighting them. The Seven Hills ministers instantly freak out at his sheer audacity. Varamir stares down the two deadliest monsters in the Empire like a total battle junkie. He practically swoons at the thought of crossing swords with the famous Northern Duke. He formally asks Ravel for permission to throw hands with both of them. Ravel sweats, realizing the Riverdon Emperor specifically sent this combat-obsessed meathead hoping he'd get injured, so they could extort Seven Hills in negotiations. Panicking, she whispers to Haven, asking if he can spar while holding back. Haven casually deadpans that if he doesn't go all out, he might accidentally kill the guy. Realizing her fiancé is a lost cause, Ravel desperately turns to her brother. She begs Eddie, her lesser evil, to take the fight and spare the prince's life. She strictly orders him not to inflict any fatal injuries, while Eddie violently pouts, complaining that takes all the fun out of it. Meanwhile, Varamir eagerly asks if Haven is stronger than Eddie, hyping up the matchup. Eddie casually mentions they've actually never sparred, and Haven instantly accepts the challenge, offering to fight Eddie for Ravel's approval. Ravel screams in pure stress as her entire court devolves into a fight club. Ravel clears her throat and plainly states that she chose Haven as her fiancé, and she decides who she marries. But Varamir, with absolute zero self-awareness, smiles and thinks that means he still has a shot. Ravel sweat drops, completely exhausted by how thick-skulled this Riverdene prince is. Later that night, Ravel and Haven are taking a quiet stroll. Out of nowhere, she asks him if he's been receiving medical treatments. She aggressively starts groping his chest, frantically noting his heartbeat feels perfectly fine. Haven blushes violently, stammering that he absolutely does not have a heart disease. Ravel realizes that when Eddie pointed at his chest earlier, she completely misread the room and assumed it was a medical issue. She keeps grabbing Haven, worriedly asking where he's hurting because his voice sounds so constrained. She grabs his arm, wondering if he has a severe digestive disorder from overworking, which would explain why he hasn't been eating. Haven covers his betrayed face, literally dying of embarrassment while Ravel frets over him. Looking at him with deep concern, Ravel remembers that in the previous timeline, Haven stayed loyal by her side until she died. She knows he must have been healthy back then, so she worries that entering the palace or taste-testing her food might have slowly poisoned him. She gently pulls his hands away from his face, softly asking him to look at her. Haven sighs and looks at her with intense eyes, swearing his disease is nothing like that. Ravel gasps and promises to hire the best doctor on the continent to cure him. Haven insists it's not a disease at all. Desperate, she demands to know the actual name of his condition. Haven playfully stretches her cheeks and confesses that his condition is simply named jealousy. Ravel mentally curses Eddie for making her panic over absolutely nothing. She asks what actually triggered him. Haven pouts, admitting he was jealous because she didn't instantly reject Riverdene's marriage proposal. He points out that she seriously considered Gripton's proposal in the past too. Ravel argues she only did that to prevent a war, but Riverdene is an ally either way. Haven softly admits he got anxious because she didn't immediately turn the prince down. Ravel argues it was so obvious she didn't want the guy that she thought she didn't even need to say it out loud. Haven smiles warmly, looking completely relieved. He apologizes for letting his own insecurities make him anxious. Feeling guilty, Ravel pulls him into a tight hug, realizing that if she gave him more certainty, her sweet fiancé wouldn't be this stressed. She playfully asks if he was really just going to stand by and watch her marry someone else. Haven instantly goes full Yandir, casually admitting his backup plan was to end the war, murder the prince, and disguise it as an accident. Ravel sweat drops at his casual murder plots, but Haven beams with pure joy hearing her call him her beloved husband-to-be. With the jealousy crisis officially averted, Ravel links arms with him, ready to head back inside. The narrator notes that with the misunderstanding cleared up, Haven is finally eating well again. Back at the diplomatic meeting, Varamir shows up with flowers, totally unbothered. Ravel formally greets him, and Varamir boldly grabs her hand. Haven instantly materializes, locking fingers with Raviel and glaring daggers at the prince as he suggests they head straight to the negotiation table. The heavy doors slam shut, it's time for the interrogation. Riverdene desperately tries to push the marriage alliance, but they are completely helpless against Raviel. A literal mountain of paperwork is slammed onto the desk. Raviel goes full boss mode, ruthlessly questioning the political logistics and land rights of the marriage. She completely corners Varamir, tearing his weak diplomatic terms to shreds. The poor prince is totally sweating bullets. Raviel shuts down his stuttering, flawlessly controlling the entire pace of the meeting. Desperate to save the alliance, Varamir throws a wild curveball, suggesting that Eddie should marry his beautiful little sister instead. The Riverdene envoys cheer, thinking it's a brilliant compromise. Raviel internally facepalms, wondering how she's supposed to cleanly dodge this new headache. Suddenly, Janice steps up looking furious. She argues it's preposterous to arrange a marriage without asking the bride. Janice stands tall, defending the principle of choice. Raviel thinks it's a great excuse, assuming Janice and Eddie have gotten closer, but she notices a terrifying glare in Janice's eyes. Varamir laughs it off, claiming his sister trusts his judgment, and he'd be honored to have Eddie as a brother-in-law. Raviel firmly states she can't agree to that either. She claims she can't arrange it without Eddie's input. Varamir completely ignores the hint and promises to bring his sister over right after the war. Running out of options, Raviel throws out a desperate lie, claiming her brother has already promised his future to someone else. Varamir gasps, demanding to know who this mystery woman is so he can persuade her to back off. Janice steps forward and drops an absolute nuke on the meeting table. She proudly points to herself and says, her. The entire room goes dead silent as Janice stands in the spotlight. Varamir totally panics, frantically apologizing for interrupting their secret romance. Meanwhile, Janice feels a terrifying, burning aura piercing the back of her head, but she hopes it's just her imagination. With the Riverdene envoys completely outmatched and thoroughly embarrassed, Raviel officially dismisses the meeting. With the interrogation over, the two nations successfully forge an alliance, officially saving the Riverdene princess from a forced political marriage. Meanwhile, the wildly chaotic Prince Varamir is literally dragged back home by his exhausted guard. Raviel thinks her diplomatic headache is over, but suddenly senses a massive, gloomy aura radiating from Haven across the room. Trying to defuse the situation, she slides over a slice of chocolate cake, gently asking if he's still angry. Haven accepts the peace offering, admitting he isn't mad but apologizing for totally lying earlier about not wanting to assassinate the prince. Raviel completely understands why he had to fake it, while Haven tells her to never apologize for that foreign scoundrel's idiocy. Watching her giant fiancé happily munch on the cake, Raviel smiles, glad he's finally eating again. Later at her desk, she scrambles to finalize the war preparations, knowing they need to hurry before her brother Eddie does something incredibly stupid. Suddenly, a terrifying thought crosses her mind. She turns to Janice, who is casually eating her own cake, and demands to know what Eddie whispered in her ear before he left. Janice bluntly replies that it's a secret. Raviel's eyes widen in sheer panic, completely terrified of whatever scheme these two lunatics are cooking up. Having zero time for games, she uses her absolute royal authority and orders Janice to spill the tea. Cornered, Janice admits Eddie asked her to trap the Emperor in the castle for as long as possible. Raviel is utterly bewildered, asking why he would want to delay her. Her internal alarms start blaring like crazy. She goes absolutely feral, throwing the doors open and screaming for her aides to bring her all the reports so she can head north immediately. Cecil effortlessly catches the flying paperwork, promising to get everything sorted. Raviel drops a totally unhinged threat, swearing to take the lives of anyone caught taking bribes while she's gone, leaving Cecil sweating bullets. After the whirlwind of chaos, Raviel finally slumps into her chair to rest, only for another knock to interrupt her peace. Cecil announces that the commander in charge of the newly conquered Pagos territory has arrived. Commander Juleton strides into the room with absolute confidence. He successfully secured the massive war funds that the former Duke of Pagos had been hoarding, proving he's highly efficient. Raviel praises Juleton for stabilizing the notoriously difficult eastern region. He reports the citizens are thriving under the lowered taxes, though a few disgruntled nobles are still lurking for an opportunity to rebel. Ravel assures him her royal inspection team is keeping a close eye on the traitors. Juleton grins fiercely, asking for permission to handle any uprisings according to his own ruthless judgment once she heads north. Bowing deeply, he swears he will never betray her trust. With the east secured, Ravel collapses onto her desk again, begging the universe for a break, but another knock immediately ruins it. This time, Cecil enters and bows deeply, expressing deep shame for his inspection team failing to uncover the Zilton smuggling ring earlier. Ravel smiles warmly, refusing to blame him and praising the young team for doing their absolute best. Touched by her kindness, Cecil chuckles and admits he could never submit a resignation letter to such an amazing ruler. Getting back to business, Ravel asks for the final update on the Zilton situation. Cecil confirms that the three most powerful noble houses in Zilton have officially allied with them. Right now, they are silently rallying forces to completely overthrow the Grypton Empire from the inside. With a sharp, confident smile, Ravel declares their preparations are finally complete. Cecil nods in agreement. The grand board is officially set, 7 hills pushing from the south, Riverdene striking from the west, and Zilton revolting from within. Meanwhile, Haven is completely stressing out in the wardrobe room, asking the maids if they have any heavy fur dresses for his fiancée. When the maid presents a simple fox fur piece, Haven rejects it, stating that northern winters are far too brutal for just lace and light fur. He aggressively blames himself for not importing high-quality northern pelts in advance, until Ravel steps in and tells him to chill out. Sipping her tea, she calmly mentions that she didn't even know marten fur dresses were a thing. She playfully scolds him, warning that an empire falls when its ruler basks in too much luxury, though she admits his worrying isn't exactly lavish. She points out that while everyone else is busy mobilizing armies, her terrifying commander-in-chief is hyper-focusing on her wardrobe. Haven argues he's just terrified she'll catch a cold with her weak immune system. Ravel promises she won't be dying anytime soon thanks to Eddie's sketchy tonics, but Haven softly begs her to stay alive in the long run, too. Smiling confidently, Ravel swears she will completely crush the war before spring even arrives. Looking out the window, she asks if her chaotic little brother will be all right in the freezing north. Haven casually sips his tea and mentions that Eddie will probably return to the northern estate around the same time they arrive. Ravel freezes, realizing her brother isn't actually there yet. Putting the pieces together, she realizes that absolute madman skipped the safe zone and marched straight toward Grypton Castle to attack them from behind. She sighs heavily, thinking about how that chaotic brat loves making her worry. But Haven smiles reassuringly, promising her that the absolute menace known as Count Sutton is not someone who gets taken down easily. Haven casually mentions he wants to see the Grypton Empire fall into absolute ruin. It's no secret the North constantly clashes with Grypton, but the tides are definitely turning in their favor. A letter confirms that Lord Sutton, Ravel's rogue brother, Eddie, led the vanguard and breached the enemy gates with minimal damage. Haven calmly states it's because the kid is a total lunatic, and Ravel just nods in agreement. She sighs bitterly, unable to deny her brother's insane recklessness or his uncanny knack for survival. An aide announces that they will be reaching the majestic castle of Durhart soon. Ravel reviews the strategy, noting that with Grypton's main forces tied up in Zilton, taking over the territory will be a breeze. Meanwhile, Eddie is hyped up, yelling that 7 Hills and Riverdene will cross the border and strike on the exact same day. Someone aggressively shushes him, telling the chaotic noble to keep his mouth shut. Smack Eddie gets scolded for acting up, whining loudly just as the door suddenly swings open. Haven strides in looking completely serious, asking Ravel if he can borrow her brother for an urgent matter. The urgent matter, Haven stares deadpan and announces they are completely out of fur. He explains that all the extra supplies went to the military, and he absolutely refuses to give Ravel second-hand winter clothes. Eddie snaps at him, shocked that the Supreme Commander wants to illegally cross the border to Mount Graham just to hunt for some pelts. Later at sunset, Eddie spots Janice perched high up in a massive tree. He asks why she's working overtime when the Duke is already around to handle any unexpected assassins. Eddie smirks, teasing the royal knight for being a little too dedicated to her guard duties. He pouts, pointing out that she really must be fond of his sister. Janice spots a fancy ribbon tied to Eddie's waist and asks if he's into that kind of style. Eddie proudly brags that it's a direct gift from Her Majesty. His face lights up as he boasts that Ravel even tied it on herself. He rubs it in, telling Janice that his sister likes him way more and would give him hundreds of ribbons if he just asked. Unfazed, Janice flexes right back, saying Ravel gave her one without her even having to ask. Eddie bursts into uncontrollable laughter. Janice pouts, wondering if the guy has completely lost his mind. Eddie condescendingly pats her head, which immediately prompts Janice to start drawing her sword. It's official, Ravel's little brother has always been crazy, but lately he's completely off the grid. Eddie then proudly shows off a dazzling earring, claiming his sister is willing to give him anything. Janice dryly points out that she literally watched him steal that earring from Ravel, while Eddie dances around demanding she call it beautiful. Janice rolls her eyes, totally unamused by his childish antics. Suddenly, Eddie tosses something straight at her. He drops the goofy act, looking totally cool as he tells her it's a gift. Janice looks at the ribbon in confusion, but Eddie just casually walks off complaining about being hungry for dinner. The next morning, Haven and Eddie finally return from their unhinged hunting trip. Ravel waits for them, looking completely exhausted by the chaos. Haven returns with heaps of game, ordering the men to make clothes, and casually mentions he also captured an enemy scout. He flashes Ravel a bright puppy dog smile, though his face is covered in dirt and scratches from pulling an all-nighter. Ravel reaches out to check on him, but he quickly flinches and pulls his hand away. He awkwardly hesitates, telling her he'll hold her hand later. Worried, she grabs his wrist anyway, only to find his hands absolutely wrecked and covered in filth. She softly holds his scarred hand, telling him that a hand that wandered the freezing mountains all night just to keep her warm could never be filthy. Haven instantly melts like butter under her loving gaze. Suddenly, Eddie bursts into the room, cheerfully offering his sister a morning drink. Haven glares at his rival, smoothly countering that he'll fetch some dried plums to cleanse her palate. But then Haven gets strangely awkward again, telling Ravel she should get back to her work. Ravel asks if he has anything else to say, but he stubbornly insists it's nothing. Frustrated by his sudden shyness, Ravel decides she's had enough. She aggressively corners him against the wall like an absolute boss, demanding to know what's wrong. Blushing furiously, Haven mumbles that because she's been so busy, they haven't been able to take their promised after-dinner walks together. And since he departs for the warfront tomorrow, he's totally crushed that they won't get another chance for a long time. Blushing, Haven boldly asks if he can visit Ravel's room tonight. Ravel is completely baffled by the sudden request. Usually, the only time he ever visits her bedroom is to play nurse when she gets poisoned. He panics, thinking she doesn't want him to share a bed with her. Haven quickly backpedals, explaining he just wants to stay by her side a little longer to watch over her while she sleeps. Ravel points out the guy just pulled an all-nighter hunting and needs rest, but he insists that looking at her gives him more strength than sleeping. She realizes he's spitting absolute game again, but her heart still skips a beat anyway. Later in her room, Haven sits faithfully by her bed, nagging the Emperor to hurry up and sleep since she also overworked herself. Ravel admits she pushed herself a bit too hard since leaving her head secretary back in the capital doubled her workload. Haven sighs, mentioning that leaving her safely in the capital might have been the better play after all. But Ravel immediately shuts that down, declaring the topic completely closed. She confidently boasts that with the strongest military powerhouse on the continent by her side, they can just crush Gripton and take the palace back. Surrendering to her logic, Haven agrees to wait faithfully for her command. Ravel softens, understanding that his severe separation anxiety stems from the recent betrayal by the Eastern nobles. He admits that staying right by her side is the only way he can react fast enough if danger strikes. Wanting to lighten the mood, Ravel asks him to share an interesting childhood memory. Haven thinks back to when he was just 9 years old. He recalls a time when an older cousin mocked him for not being a true Derhart, so little Haven completely wrecked the guy in a brawl. After getting scolded for the fight, Haven coldly asked his father if he was truly his son. Growing up, he never had a real mentor, only greedy adults circling him like vultures. But Haven reveals he wasn't actually talking about himself. He's describing Ravel, a lonely child who had to protect her little brother all on her own. He leans in close, whispering that he should have found her so much sooner. Ravel silently agrees, knowing that if they had met earlier, Eddie wouldn't have been forced to rewind time in absolute tears. She gently touches his face, reassuring him that she's perfectly fine now that he's here. But she makes him swear to return safe and sound. She tells him he can run away or lose the war, but he absolutely must come back to her without a single hair on his head missing. Ravel then orders him to finally go to sleep. Haven smiles, promising to leave the moment her eyes close. Desperate to let her exhausted fiancé rest, Ravel fights the urge to stay awake, knowing she needs to knock out ASAP for his sake. As she drifts off, Haven whispers a vow to follow her wherever she goes. Fast forward a month later at the Derhart Castle, Ravel is still totally cooped up with endless paperwork. An aide arrives, confirming that the massive extra supply of cotton winter clothes is ready. Ravel efficiently orders inspectors to ensure the workers are actually getting paid for the rush job. Confused, the aide asks why they dropped 50,000 gold on extra clothes when the troops already have gear. She drops some basic logistics logic. Wet winter clothes cause frostbite and dry gear keeps morale from tanking. The aide sweat drops, realizing the title of emperor is basically just a fancy word for the empire's glorified workhorse. He suggests she take a breather since Haven's forces literally just scored a massive victory yesterday. It turns out the Imperial and Northern Allied armies have been absolutely steamrolling the Gripton troops for a solid month. Now the Imperial army is moving to link up with Riverdene, while the Northern forces locked down Gripton Castle. Despite the massive winning streak, Ravel just can't stop stressing. Out in the freezing winter wasteland, the stakes are ridiculously high. Gripton has a 20,000-strong army backed by Zilton's stolen gold, while Seven Hills only has 12,000 troops. Because of their stolen resources, the warmongering Gripton Empire stubbornly believes they can outlast the heroes. We then flash back to a month ago, right before the grand departure for the war. Ravel looks up at Haven, reminding him of their super important promise. She repeats her strict rule: he isn't allowed to get hurt and he absolutely has to come back to her. Haven gives her a heartwarming smile, swearing he'll never forget. Like a worried mom, she starts nagging him to eat 3 square meals a day plus snacks. Meanwhile, Eddie leans over to Janice, casually telling the royal knight to protect his sister well while he's gone. Unfazed by his chaotic energy, Janice dryly tells him to save his breath and just have a good trip. Eddie catches Janice staring and playfully asks why she's just standing there like a statue. He points out that she didn't put on the ribbon he gifted her, and Janice instantly flinches, totally busted. But Eddie just laughs it off, giving her a friendly head pat and saying Ravel's ribbon suits her better anyway before cheerfully bouncing out. Outside, Eddie yells at the soldiers to hurry up, but they complain the commander-in-chief is just moving way too fast for them to keep up. Back inside, there's a sudden knock on Ravel's door. An aide announces that Duchess Skyer is requesting an immediate audience. Ravel is completely caught off guard, and Janice looks just as confused as her boss. Ravel wonders why the fierce ruler of the West would travel all the way up north. She glances at Janice, who violently shakes her head, having zero clue. The Duchess strides in and drops a massive bombshell. The Zilton nobles are officially demanding an audience with Her Majesty. Ravel is heavily intrigued, asking exactly who wants to meet. It turns out Count Donau and his neighboring lords are forming a united front. The catch: once the war ends, these nobles want Ravel to legally guarantee their wealth, properties, and titles. Ravel smiles sharply. She isn't running a charity and demands to know what they bring to the table first. The Duchess confidently reveals their bargaining chip: total, unconditional surrender. Janice realizes her boss's strategic gears are turning as Ravel closely processes this massive geopolitical play. Taking a calm sip of tea, Ravel agrees to their terms but points out one glaring issue. She notes that the Zilton nobles are under heavy Gripton surveillance, meaning they can't just stroll into Seven Hills without getting executed. The Duchess smirks, revealing the insane punchline to this negotiation. They want the Emperor of Seven Hills to march right up to the Zilton border herself. Janice absolutely loses it, screaming that it's obviously a trap to lure Ravel straight into the middle of the battlefield. The Duchess claps back, telling her daughter to chill since she'll personally escort the Emperor. To prove it's a legit deal, she reveals Count Donau sent a detailed list of all the supplies Gripton stole from them. She argues that these greedy merchants are losing so much money under Gripton's rule, they're willing to risk it all for a way out. But Janice fiercely fires back, arguing that Ravel has zero obligation to bet her life just because some desperate merchants are betting theirs. Before it turns into a full-blown family feud, Ravel raises a hand, ordering the mother-daughter duo to stand down. Janice tries to protest, but Ravel calmly says she needs to hear the full pitch, immediately silencing her fiercely loyal knight. Duchess Skyer jokes that Ravel must have cast a mind control spell to make her daughter this obedient, though Ravel smoothly denies it. Standing up, Ravel gets down to business, asking exactly where these nobles want to hold this dangerous summit. She taps a map, pointing to Fioltavan, a town right on the tense border of the two territories. Ravel realizes this is dangerously close to Haven's advance route. If Zilton surrenders here, her fiancé's army can blitz the old capital without worrying about getting flanked. The Duchess formally warns Ravel to instantly reject the deal if she senses a trap. Ravel smirks, reminding the Duchess that this wild gamble was her idea to begin with. The Duchess warmly grabs Ravel's hands, agreeing with Janice that the Emperor's safety always comes first. She respectfully bows, completely ready to shut the whole operation down if Ravel gives the word. Ravel smiles softly, finally seeing firsthand why this powerhouse woman has commanded the West's absolute respect for 25 years. She praises the Duchess for always giving 100% for the Empire, telling her to rest easy while the Emperor makes the final call. Taking a deep breath, Ravel announces that the strategic reward is just too massive to pass up. She's accepting the meeting. The Duchess awkwardly sweats, joking that Janice will literally end her if Ravel gets hurt. Ravel laughs, ignoring Janice's terrifying glare in the background. Once again, the regressor Emperor decides to completely throw away the rulebook and make an unprecedented play. She's banking entirely on the desperate faith of the Zilton merchants to secure a bloodless victory. Before setting off for the border town, Ravel attends a small victory feast and calls over her aide, Michelle. Michelle eagerly steps up as Ravel asks if there's any spicy news in Haven's latest field report. Secretly, Ravel only agreed to the border meeting so she could sneak a date with Haven, but the madman is conquering territory way too fast for her to catch up. Michelle smiles, saying there's one piece of weird gossip she couldn't quite figure out. They discuss a wild rumor. The undisputed monster of the North actually used to be a massive crybaby when he was a kid. Ravel is completely shook, wondering how a weeping toddler turned into a continent-conquering absolute unit. She remembers the historical stories of how the Northern elders vehemently opposed Haven taking over the duchy. Apparently, his own father kept him away from power until Haven's personality totally flipped at age 16. Michelle explains that teenage Haven became so terrifyingly aggressive, the elders thought he'd literally destroy the entire Northern territory. Even though Haven constantly denies it, everyone assumes a mysterious teacher figure completely rewired his brain. But Ravel just smiles fondly, totally accepting her ruthless, overpowered fiancé exactly as he is. She makes a mental note to calm his bloodthirsty side down once they finally meet up, ensuring he earns the people's respect. Michelle warmly thanks Her Majesty, and the scene transitions to the very next day. Ravel finally arrives at the designated meeting spot, but as she looks over the balcony, she instantly breaks out in a cold sweat, realizing there are way more people waiting for her than she bargained for. Janice is absolutely stressing out, telling Ravel she should be glued to her side because of the massive crowd. As Janice promises to join her ASAP, Ravel just sweat drops, realizing her knight is just as fiercely protective as her fiancé. But up to this point, Ravel still has no idea just how crazy Haven can really be. At sunset, Ravel's carriage finally arrives at the frontline camp, and Eddie orders the troops to settle in for the night. Inside one of the tents, Haven aggressively waves a maid away, demanding absolute privacy. The moment Ravel walks in, he wraps her in a massive hug. She's totally stunned, but he smoothly claims he came just because she's here. Panicking, Ravel asks about the Stendhal frontline and if the Gripton forces are fighting back. She realizes this madman must have abandoned his post and rode at warp speed the second he sensed she might be in danger. But Haven completely ignores the military logistics. He just gazes into her eyes and confesses how much he missed her. Ravel's heart melts. She softens her tone, admitting she was worried and wanted to see him too. She quickly checks him for injuries, but Haven proudly brags that he wouldn't dare get a scratch after she ordered him to stay perfectly safe. He flashes her a blinding smile, and Ravel tells him to take his time getting ready for dinner. But the second he leaves, she staggers against a table, her heart absolutely pounding out of her chest from his romantic ambush. She desperately hopes she managed to look cool and composed on the outside. Later at the dinner table, the vibe is ice cold. Haven glares at Duchess Skyer, confronting her for dragging the Emperor all the way out here. He calls out her reckless plan, arguing that those Zilton nobles would have eventually surrendered to Seven Hills anyway. Haven coldly states the facts. Traitors who turn their backs once will definitely backstab you again. But the Duchess fires right back, calling Haven simple-minded and arguing that fighting against an invader isn't a betrayal. Before a brawl breaks out over dinner, Ravel heavily sighs, defending the Duchess by reminding Haven that coming here was her own choice. Instantly, Haven switches up like a total simp, beaming and praising Ravel's wise decision while the Duchess looks ridiculously annoyed. Leaning over, Janice whispers to her mom that she really doesn't like the Duke. The Duchess whispers back that the feeling is definitely mutual, noting that loonies stick together. Janice loses it, loudly demanding to know whose side her mother is on. The Duchess bellows back that she's strictly Team Empress. Suddenly turning to Ravel, the Duchess demands to know how she enchanted her daughter. Ravel just awkwardly sweats, swearing she didn't do anything. Refusing to believe her, the Duchess dramatically begs to ride in Ravel's carriage so she can observe the two of them with her own eyes. Ravel allows it, but the Duchess ends up throwing in the towel in less than a day. Inside the carriage, the Duchess suspects Ravel is working nonstop just to hide something, but Ravel sighs, pointing out her workload is just genuinely that insane. The Duchess vents that she raised Janice for 18 years and still has zero clue what goes on in her head. Ravel relates hard, admitting her brother Eddie is just as unpredictable. The Duchess asks if Janice ever opens up about her future goals. Ravel smiles, confident that Janice is already doing exactly what she wants, being her loyal guard. She explains that Janice normally acts like a lazy cat, taking naps in the sun and dozing off after eating sweets. But the exact second someone knocks on the office door, she instantly snaps into guard dog mode, ready to protect her emperor. The Duchess shivers at the thought of her daughter slacking off, but Ravel assures her that Eddie wouldn't have hired a total amateur. Dropping her tough exterior, the Duchess admits she just never fully trusted Janice and wanted to make sure she was actually doing okay. Ravel's gaze softens, noting how sad it is when genuine intentions get lost in translation. The Duchess smiles warmly, finally seeing the real person behind the crown. She thanks Ravel for listening to her grumble, admitting the Emperor is way more interesting than she originally thought. She confesses that when a young, 24-year-old countess first took the throne thanks to her brother, everyone thought Seven Hills was totally doomed. After the previous ruler ruined the empire, the Duchess wasn't about to take a blind leap of faith. Ravel internally agrees, knowing she only survived this mess because she literally regressed in time. The Duchess recalls the very first official document the new Empress sent out. And it was an absolute nightmare of overdue paperwork. The Duchess admits she didn't want to touch that administrative disaster, while Ravel remembers she almost died fixing it. But Ravel realizes that if Eddie hadn't believed in her, she wouldn't have made it this far either. She smiles softly, knowing her chaotic little brother truly understands her better than anyone. Back in the present, Ravel shivers in the night air and tells Haven they should head inside for some hot tea. She steps into the tent, relieved that someone already got a fire roaring. She warmly calls Haven over to sit by the flames with her. But instead of warming up normally, Haven literally shoves his bare hands straight into the crackling fire. Ravel watches in absolute horror, stammering that he must be freezing, but Haven just deadpans that he isn't. She totally freaks out, screaming at him to pull back before he roasts his hands like marshmallows, but Haven just stares into the flames and casually says, "This is fine." Haven casually drops that he's doing it because she previously mentioned she loves holding his big, warm hands. Ravel is stunned, realizing he thought she avoided his touch earlier just because his hands were too cold. She starts to explain that wasn't the reason at all, suddenly realizing what's actually happening. Internally, Ravel panics, totally regretting her past actions and realizing she screwed up again. Haven looks at her softly, admitting he doesn't quite know how to describe what he's feeling. He confesses that his stomach is full of butterflies, and holding her hands never felt this intense before. He desperately clarifies that he isn't pulling away because he dislikes her. In fact, it's the exact opposite. He leans in close and Ravel's breath hitches. Gently stroking her face, Haven asks if his touch is unpleasant. He leans in even closer, asking if they can put these wild feelings to a test. The two sit by the warm fire, totally wrapped up in each other. Haven goes in for a kiss, admitting that if holding her hand makes him this anxious, kissing her will literally drive him crazy. As the fire crackles, he softly asks how the test went. Blushing hard, he asks if that gave her the butterflies again. Ravel teases him, pointing out that he's finally feeling attracted to her after all this time. Flustered, she quickly stammers that she was always attracted to him, just not in this overwhelming way. Haven flashes a knowing smirk, and Ravel grumbles, telling him to wipe that smug look off his face. He grabs her hand tight and drops the ultimate confession: he truly loves her. He goes full romantic, declaring he'd gladly face death again just for this moment. Ravel is instantly confused by the word again. But Haven just smiles, internally hoping he can tell her the full truth about the past one day. Soon enough, they arrive in Stendhal to meet the Zilton nobles, but Ravel walks into an absolutely horrendous scene. The highest-ranking nobles of Zilton are literally groveling on the ground, pressing their heads into the dirt. Ravel sweat drops, figuring this diplomatic negotiation is already doomed from the start. Duchess Skyer loses it, screaming at Haven for treating their potential allies like total garbage. Haven just glares at Count Donau, coldly asking if they are there against their will. The Count practically jumps out of his skin. Sweating bullets, the Count frantically yells that they are humbly kneeling to show maximum respect and were absolutely not forced. Ravel sighs, knowing her hyperprotective fiancé was just glaring at them to ensure her safety. Count Donau instantly starts sucking up, thanking the Emperor for making the dangerous trip out here. He totally knows that asking the ruler of Seven Hills to step onto a live battlefield was a massive reach. Ravel keeps her cool, knowing she can't scold Haven or her knights in front of people who might still be enemies. Sitting down like an absolute boss, she smiles and says it's a great first impression before demanding to hear their surrender conditions. Count Donau admits they have no leverage to demand anything, but their people's lives are literally on the line. Ravel points out she needs a solid reason to actually trust them. The Count desperately glances at Duchess Skyer, hoping she'll vouch for them. Ravel smoothly states that while she trusts the Duchess, she doesn't blindly trust everything the Duchess believes in. She brings up the massive elephant in the room. Gripton has endless gold and would definitely pay them to stay loyal. But Count Donau drops some facts, saying Gripton already controls them fully and won't pay them a single dime. He admits that as a seasoned merchant, he knows Gripton's warmongering strategy is completely unsustainable. He can read the market, and right now, the Gripton Empire is a sinking ship. He predicts their endless invasions will eventually cause the entire empire to self-destruct. Plus, their main trade partner is Riverdin, and getting annexed by them instead of Seven Hills would utterly tank their profits. Ravel tests him one last time, asking if he'll stay loyal even after the war ends and Gripton retreats. The Count eagerly swears they will do their absolute best. Inside, Ravel does a happy little twirl, thrilled that she just secured even more massive territories for Seven Hills. She turns to the Duchess and randomly asks if she knows what a pyramid scheme is, leaving the older woman totally confused. Haven praises her flawless negotiation skills, offering to escort her to a room so she can finally rest. They head to Haven's room first, but the mighty Duke suddenly gets flustered, warning her that it's a bit of a mess. Ravel steps inside and is completely stunned by what she sees. She looks at him in disbelief, asking if this rundown shack is seriously the room of the Supreme Commander and her fiancé. Instead of a luxurious setup, the richest duke in the north is sleeping on a basic, tiny bed next to a totally dilapidated fireplace. Looking at the dilapidated room, it genuinely hurts Ravel to see her fiancé living like this. She asks why he's staying in a literal closet when there's a massive room right across the hall. Haven just beams, saying he picked this spot because it's closest to her room. He gently takes her hand, leading her across the hall to show her around. He proudly presents the massive, luxurious room he set aside just for her. Ravel stares at him in absolute disbelief. Panic immediately sets in for Haven as he asks if she hates it, but she quickly shakes her head. She realizes he dumped all his effort into decking out her room while completely neglecting his own, even though she's only staying a few nights. Staring at him, she admits that in the past, she never cared about his living conditions because she just didn't like him back then. Haven just smiles warmly, smoothly saying that's actually a massive relief. He tells her it's a relief because it means she actually cares about him now. But Ravel isn't having it. She orders him to switch rooms immediately, though Haven stubbornly insists he's totally fine with the shack. She angrily demands he get a better one, but he refuses to budge. Haven drops another smooth line, insisting the best room for him is simply the one closest to her. He then asks if she wants anything else, promising to literally move mountains to give her whatever she desires. He tells her to pick absolutely anything in her luxurious room to serve as his engagement gift to her. Looking at her like she hung the stars, he promises he just wants her to sleep in the best room, wear the finest clothes, and have everything she could ever want. Ravel's heart completely melts, and she softly replies that she already has exactly what she wants right in front of her. She gently squeezes his hand, admitting she doesn't need a single thing as long as he's by her side. Looking into his devoted eyes, she realizes Haven wants her now just as fiercely as he did in her past life. Haven chuckles, teasing that her line was super cliché, but admitting that the raw truth holds a lot of power over him. He whispers that as long as she's with him, he is completely fulfilled. Suddenly, the sweet moment is interrupted when an aide announces that the civilian representatives of Stendhal have arrived. Inside the hall, a desperate town representative violently throws himself onto the floor, sobbing that the Gripton army extorted all their goods and worked their youth to death. He begs the emperor for pity, but Ravel just looks completely bewildered. The man cries that if Seven Hills also pillages their town, they will literally starve for a year. Ravel immediately shuts him down, firmly stating she never once asked them for a single thing. The representative is totally confused, stammering about a rumor that Seven Hills wanted to seize all their leather and cotton. Ravel glances at Count Donau, who is sweating buckets, instantly realizing the Zilton nobles must have spread those fake rumors to pressure their own citizens into submitting. But internally, she notes that if they win over a third of Zilton's people, Riverdin won't dare start another war. The end of this conflict is finally in sight. Haven aggressively glares at the nobles, noting that Gripton has already retreated most of their forces to the capital city. They know they're totally cooked. He smoothly turns to Ravel, bragging that he's always ready to make Riverdin kneel before her too, earning a soft laugh from the emperor. She thinks to herself that even though Haven acts like a bloodthirsty attack dog sometimes, she finally knows the exact cheat code to calm him down. Dropping the ultimate bait, she casually mentions that she thought they were going to get married in the spring. Haven's eyes practically glow with intense motivation. Without missing a beat, he swears he'll end the war completely before spring even arrives. Ravel mentally smirks, knowing her fiancé would never back down from a challenge like that. Later that night, Ravel is back at her desk staring down a mountain of paperwork, trying to speedrun her tasks so she can head home. But her mind completely derails as she daydreams about Haven's sparkling, handsome face. She catches herself blushing and shakes her head. Janice tilts her head, asking if the Emperor is feeling sick. Janice bluntly tells her to just go to bed if she's tired, offering to help with the documents. Ravel is absolutely touched. Her usually lazy guard dog is skipping naps and actively offering to do administrative work just to help her out. Ravel sighs, mysteriously mentioning that she's deeply struggling with a problem she just can't seem to solve. Janice looks totally confused, pointing out that her boss is literally a genius who can do absolutely anything. Ravel chuckles to herself, realizing her knight's blind loyalty is turning her into a total loony just like the rest of her inner circle. She thinks it's absolutely adorable how sincerely Janice is listening to her vent. Wiping her eye, she thanks her guard but declines the help, admitting her current plan might accidentally put the people she loves in serious danger. Janice deadpans, asking if she's worried about the Duke. She bluntly states that the Duke is the danger, so worrying about him is completely pointless. Ravel realizes her guard is 100% right. Haven himself would probably say the exact same thing. He would just flash that sweet smile of his and say that's fine, ready to burn down the world to take care of her anyway. Flopping onto her desk, she chides herself for acting like a lovesick teenager while her empire is literally in the middle of a massive war. Seeing her boss short-circuit over romance, Janice finally steps in, offering to at least organize the mountain of paperwork so they can wrap this up. Ravel is completely touched watching Janice diligently sort through the endless paperwork instead of taking her usual nap. She realizes she was totally right about her knight. Janice really is a kind, thoughtful girl beneath her lazy exterior. Ravel softly compliments her, calling Janice a genuinely good person. Janice quickly waves it off, claiming she just didn't want her siblings sitting around while she did all the work, but Ravel still thinks it's super cute. But despite Janice's sweet efforts, some deeply unpleasant news arrives that evening. Haven looks dead serious, ordering Ravel to pack up and leave at dawn. He explains that the massive Gripton army is finally on the move, meaning the climax of the war has arrived. Haven grimly deduces that the enemy forces must have pinpointed the Emperor's exact location. Fortunately, the allied Zilton nobles managed to slip past the blockade completely unseen. That means Ravel's presence on the front lines is now the only remaining liability. Taking a calm sip of her tea, she agrees to evacuate just as he wishes. She totally understands that Haven is forcing her away just to keep her safe. Ravel admits she took a massive gamble coming here in the first place, and sticking around won't help anybody. Even so, she's low-key fuming. The cold, purely logical way he's telling her to leave is driving her crazy. Noticeably hurt, Haven asks if she's really not going to even look at him. Ravel stubbornly keeps her eyes shut, knowing that if she looks into those eyes, she'll completely lose the nerve to walk away. Softening his tone, Haven gently asks her to close her eyes for just a moment. She remembers how this insanely powerful man closed his eyes without hesitation the moment she asked. Her heart aches, knowing she can never let herself be a burden to such a lovable guy. Suddenly, Ravel throws a wild curveball, asking if he'd stay by her side if she somehow destroyed the entire Gripton army tonight. Haven stares at her intensely, genuinely asking if that's her ultimate wish. Looking at his serious face, Ravel realizes he must be feeling the exact same separation anxiety. Haven admits he thought she was tired of him since she agreed to leave so easily. Ravel shuts that down instantly, realizing he just wants to be glued to her side 24/7. His aura suddenly shifts into overdrive, and Haven casually drops that he'll just go annihilate the enemy army tonight. Ravel feels insanely reassured by her overpowered fiancé. She realizes all she really wants to scream is for him not to leave her alone. But the desperate words stay completely stuck in her throat as she tightly grips his sleeve. Suddenly, a voice calls out for Her Majesty, completely snapping her out of the romantic trance. The door creaks open, and Janice casually peeks in to apologize for the interruption. She dryly announces that Ravel's other personal loony has arrived. Ravel is absolutely baffled. She asks Haven if this guy isn't supposed to be stationed in Wislow right now. Haven sighs heavily, pointing out that logic doesn't apply to Count Sutton. Sure enough, Eddie is there pouting, claiming he ditched his post because Duke Durhart was taking way too long to attack. Ravel panics, reminding her chaotic brother that Haven is literally stationed here just to protect her. She nervously asks where Eddie's regiment is, and he proudly flashes a smile, bragging that he marched in as a total one-man army. Ravel's eyes soften. She instantly sees through his bluff, knowing Eddie just crossed a literal war zone alone to check on her safety. She affectionately pats her brother's head. Eddie whines about being treated like a kid, but she knows he secretly loves the attention. Putting an end to the family reunion, Haven orders Eddie to escort the Empress safely back to Seven Hills. Haven promises to join them after he completely flattens Gripton, asking if taking 10,000 men will be enough. Eddie flashes a wicked smirk, suggesting that 2,000 fast-moving troops would be way better for an absolute blitzkrieg. Later that night under the glowing moon, Ravel stares out at the fortress, wishing she could spend just a bit more time with Haven. Standing alone in her room, she lets out a heavy, lonely sigh. She tries absolutely everything to fall asleep, even counting Edwins for 2 straight hours, but nothing works. Giving up, she sneaks out into the dark hallway, deciding to go gaze at Haven's face for just a minute. Suddenly, she bumps into a shadow in the pitch-black corridor, letting out a startled squeak. It's Janice. Ravel's heart hammers in her chest as she asks what on earth her knight is doing roaming the halls in the dead of night. Janice casually replies that she's on guard duty. Ravel is stunned, realizing the girl stays up all night guarding her door. The mystery of Janice's constant daytime naps is finally solved. Ravel tells her dedicated knight to go get some actual rest since Haven and Eddie are around. But Janice stubbornly refuses, offering to personally escort the Emperor wherever she's trying to sneak off to. Ravel completely freezes, staring awkwardly at Haven's bedroom door, realizing she can't exactly bring a chaperone on a late-night romantic mission. Catching on instantly, Janice gives a knowing bow and smoothly leaves the Emperor to her midnight romance. Ravel stands frozen in the hallway, completely flabbergasted by Janice's sudden departure. She clenches her hands in embarrassment, admitting she has no idea what she's doing either, but silently thanking her guard for being so incredibly discreet. With a quiet click, Ravel slips into Haven's room, determined not to wake him since he has a massive battle ahead tomorrow. She tiptoes over to his bedside, watching him sleep peacefully under the soft moonlight. She sighs softly, thinking about how exhausted he must be, when suddenly his lips curve into a playful smile. Haven opens his eyes and cheekily points out that it isn't proper for her to visit his bedroom so late, causing a startled Ravel to gasp in disbelief. She stammers, demanding to know how long he has actually been awake. He sits up slowly, teasing that he has been awake the entire time she has. Haven smiles warmly, explaining that this is exactly why he chose the room directly adjacent to hers in the first place. Blushing furiously, Ravel tells him to go back to sleep, but Haven insists he could never rest with her standing right there. Ravel melts inside, realizing he only moved to this room to keep her in his sight for as long as possible. Even without words, the sheer comfort of just seeing each other's faces is more than enough for them. She gently commands him to go back to sleep so she can watch over him, but Haven refuses, declaring that tonight is his turn to take care of her. Laughing, she playfully shoves him back down onto the mattress. But she loses her footing. Ravel wobbles and flops right onto the bed, landing directly on top of Haven, who instantly catches her in a tight embrace. She blushes furiously, wondering if she actually overpowered him before realizing the giant simply stopped resisting. She squirms to get away, but his strong arms pull her back in, locking her in a cozy embrace. Their hearts beat in perfect unison, echoing loudly in the quiet room. Wrapped in his warmth, Ravel shuts her eyes and wonders what is running through his mind. Snuggled closely together under the covers, they silently share the exact same peaceful thoughts. The next morning, Haven escorts her to the carriage, bidding her a safe journey with a gentle smile. Settling into her seat, Ravel recalls falling asleep in his bed but waking up mysteriously tucked into her own room. She tries to awkwardly ask him about it, fidgeting in embarrassment. Haven just chuckles, telling her she doesn't need to explain a thing. He promises to keep their little midnight rendezvous entirely between them, flashing a charming smirk. As the carriage pulls away, Ravel facepalms, calling herself an idiot for not being more affectionate before they parted. She sighs, deeply regretting her shy nature and promising herself she will work on being bolder. Suddenly, Haven reaches through the open window, pulling her close for one final, sudden embrace. He looks up at her with a beautiful, blushing smile and whispers that he loves her. Ravel holds her chest as her heart skips a beat, knowing she must win this war so they can finally be together permanently. She watches his silhouette fade, completely confident that he will return safely just as he always does. Sometime later, back at the palace, Eddie sits across from her at tea, cheekily asking if it's true she promised him to someone. Ravel instantly chokes on her tea, coughing violently as Eddie frantically hands her some water. She recovers, her eyes twitching as she remembers Eddie's previous meeting with Prince Varamir of Riverdon. She panics, realizing Eddie is asking about the fake marriage claim she used to reject the prince. Dabbing her face, she quickly lies that it was just a strategic excuse to turn down Varamir's weird proposal, but Eddie doesn't look fully convinced. Eddie leans in with a mischievous grin, teasing that she would be amazing in a relationship and asking if there's anyone she fancies. He cheekily boasts that he would make a fantastic brother-in-law, keeping his eyes locked on her. Ravel gets literal chills, sweating under his incredibly suspicious, playful gaze. Desperate to escape the interrogation, she abruptly changes the subject to Gripton's defeat and their next moves. She explains that Riverdon's crown prince has requested an urgent audience, likely to negotiate how they will split the conquered territory of Zilton. A formal negotiation with the crown prince of their primary ally is about to begin. But Ravel just snickers darkly, noting they have no leverage since she already took over a third of Zilton. She has zero time to mope around missing Haven when there is a country to run. She resolves to do her job perfectly, both for her own sake and for Haven's future. Stepping up to the grand doors, she prepares to meet the Crown Prince of Riverdon, but Janice quietly objects. Suddenly, Eddie barks happily and darts down the hallway like a golden retriever, wearing outfits that perfectly match her royal colors. He cheekily winks, offering to escort her to the meeting in the Duke's place, and Ravel happily takes his arm. Nodding in satisfaction, she enters the grand hall to face the Crown Prince of Riverdon. Standing beside the polite Crown Prince is his younger brother Varamir, who is waving his arms like a complete maniac. While Prince Varamir wildly waves, his poor attendant desperately tries to hold him back, begging the chaotic royal to show some basic dignity. Meanwhile, the serious Crown Prince, Prince Penser, looks completely peeved, and Raviel instantly realizes he had absolutely no clue his little brother was going to act like a total golden retriever. Seeing the awkward tension rapidly building in the room, Raviel decides she needs to intervene and starts to call out to Varamir. But before she can even finish her sentence, a hand smoothly reaches out to dismiss the awkwardness, telling the guests to ignore the careless words of the wild prince. Suddenly, with a dramatic spin, Eddie swoops in, grabs Janice, and whispers super close to her face that she is his one and only love.